Just a heads up that we're about to go live with the meeting. Good morning, members, and thank you for joining us here at County Hall for the Police and Crime Panel Budget meeting. I will just go through some quick introductions followed by apologies. I am Councillor Alistair Keddy and I am Chair of the panel. I will go around the members and then we will introduce the OPCC.
Hi, I'm Councillor Louise Bown. My ward is Radipole, which is in Weymouth in Dorset, and I'm Vice Chair of this panel.
My name is Patrick Canavan. I'm a councillor in BCP representing Boscombe West.
Councillor Carl Wood, Gillingham Ward, Dorset Council.
Councillor Louis O'Leary, Littlemore Preston Ward in Weymouth, Dorset Council.
Good morning, Councillor Simon Gibson. I represent Verwood on Dorset Council.
Good morning, Councillor David Flagg, BCP Council, representing Burton Grange Ward.
Morning, Councillor Karen Rampton, BCP Council, representing Talbot and Branksome Woods Ward.
Morning, Councillor Peter Sidaway, Broadstone.
Thank you, members. I would now like to introduce the PCC and hand over to him to introduce the members of the OPCC and the Chief.
Thank you, Chair. My name's David Sidwick. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. I'm joined today by our Chief Constable, Amanda Pearson. I also have with me my Chief Executive, Simon Bullock, my Director of Operations, Adam Harold, and particularly of relevance for today, my Chief Financial Officer, Judy Strange. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We are also joined by our Democratic Services officers and our Dorset Council representative, Mark. Do we have any apologies?
Thanks, Chair. So, yeah, I'm Mark Eyre. I'm the lead officer for the Police and Crime Panel. And we've got two apologies, and that's from Ben Sargent, who's the co-optee for the panel, and Councillor Sarah Williams.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting. These were circulated in advance. Could I get somebody to propose that they're a fair record of the previous panel?
President Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. And could we get a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Rampton. Item 3, declarations of interests. Do any members present have any declarations of interest they feel would impact on today's proceedings? I've received no indications, so we will move forward to item 4, public participation. Do we have any questions from the public?
Thanks, Chair. We have one question, and it's from a member of the public, Mr. Mark Ellis, and I'll read that question through now. So, Dorset Police refuse to accept and address complaints against Dorset Police's own officers and staff. The Office for the Police and Crime Commissioner does not accept direct complaints against Dorset Police's refusal to police and complaints against behaviour of Dorset Police, including the behaviour of professional standards team. What actions has the Commissioner taken to investigate the whole complaint handling process of Dorset Police and hold the Chief Constable to account for training across the force?
And thank you very much for the question. Like all forces, Dorset Police is required to handle complaints received from the public. It's very similar to Amazon, for example. The first port of call is whoever is providing the service. Save for certain circumstances, for instance, when the most serious complaints, which are then dealt by the Independent Office of Police Conduct, The regulations state that complaints against police officers and staff must be dealt with by the force. In other words, my office is therefore not able to record or investigate complaints about Dorset police officers and staff, as it's not within my remit. My office does, however, deal with the majority of appeals or reviews, as they are known, again, in line with the relevant laws and procedures. As this panel has heard previously, there is a rigorous programme of scrutiny that covers the complaints process. In addition to the reviews undertaken by the Complaints Review Officer, complaints materials are subject to additional inquiry at the Use of Police Powers and Standards Scrutiny Panel, which happens on a quarterly basis, at which complaints, data and processes are scrutinised not only by myself, but also independent volunteers. This includes a regular dip sampling of force complaints to ensure that good standards are present and that the policies are being followed. Summaries of the scrutiny panel meetings are published on my website. But there's additional scrutiny. My Director of Operations also attends the Force Standards and Ethics Board, at which force level service is discussed, and holds regular meetings with the Head of Professional Standards to best understand the complaint handling processes and ensure that strong levels of customer service are maintained. There is also an organisational learning board and legitimacy board that the Director of Operations attends, so that my office can be assured that lessons are learned and that training picks up areas that can be improved upon. Myself and the Director of Operations also meet with the Independent Office of Police Conduct representatives to understand any national trends, and alongside the information available to us locally, ensure that Dorset Police's complaints performance compares well with other similar force areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, Mr. Ellis, for your question. Do we have any further items of public participation? Okay, so we now move on to item 5, which is the budget precept for the financial year 26-27. The purpose of this is to set out the Police and Crime Commissioner's proposals for the budget and precept. This is one of the key statutory dates and deliverables for this panel. The documents have been prepared and distributed from the OPCC CFO. And I know that these have received solid scrutiny from our members and a number of questions have been raised. I would like to note that the run-up to the preparation of the budget has had some exceptional circumstances with the release of the Policing Reform White Paper and delays in providing a full set of figures to the OPCC CFO. I would like to commend the CFO for her work in preparing this report under quite extreme circumstances and pressures. So a quick reminder of the rules. We have some statutory rules regarding the decision that we make today. So as a panel, we can decide to support the precept proposal, which requires a simple majority of panel members present. We are more than quorate today. We can, if there are concerns with any of the content of the budget report, we can still support but request extra clarity. And that can either be delivered via questioning in this session, or we could request a further review at a panel in the future, our next panel being July. The next option for the panel is to choose not to support the precept proposal. This again is decided by a simple majority of panel members present. We then, if the panel decides not to support, there's an additional option to veto the proposal for being too high or too low. This would require 8 panel members to vote against the proposed precept, and only those panel members physically present at the meeting would be entitled to vote. We do have the numbers for this if it became necessary. The panel will be asked to vote on the PCC's recommendation as set out in the report. Each member of the panel will be asked to advise if they do or do not support, and we'll do that via a round robin. If the majority do not support the budget report, the panel will vote on whether to veto the precepts. If a veto is approved, a further precept meeting will be held on the 19th of February for the PCC to present a revised precept. There is no further ability to veto at that meeting or after this point. Do members have any questions regarding the rules and procedures for this part of the meeting? Okay, perfect. Then we are ready to proceed. The next steps will be I'll pass to the PCC to present his report, followed by questions, and then we will go on to the Chief Constable to present a statement as well. And then we will have member questions following. So, without further ado, I'll pass over to the Commissioner to present his statement.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, panel. I find this extremely uncomfortable that I have to ask for an increase in precept, in this case £15, £1.25 a month. It's not where I wanted to be. I know full well the strains on families and people's budgets. I am by nature a low taxation person, and I believe the state should only ask for what it needs, not what it wants. Particularly in the case of policing, it's vital that there's strong local governance to ensure that people's will is enacted, but also that every penny counts. So I have to balance two things. The feeling that I don't want to do this with the need to keep people safe. Now, the state, the government, always puts in its calculations that they assume a police and crime commissioner asks for the full precept. I am doing that only because the perverse national funding formula has driven me to do so. I do it with great reluctance, and only because the alternative would, in my view, and indeed the view of the Chief Constable, would compromise the safety of Dorset. You alluded to it, Chair, that this has been an extremely difficult budget setting period. It's the hardest that I've known since I've been PCC, not least because of the lateness of the information, but also that originally we were only given one number, the final number to juggle with. I'd like to pay tribute again to my staff and indeed the accounts team within Dorset Police as well, in order to get us here with the information that we've got. We have the information to understand what we need to ask for. What we don't have, because we need to work through it, is the full information about where all the component parts will wind up. What I want to do today, this morning, is make certain the panel has the same information that I had in order to come to this decision and this request. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite three people to make presentation. I'm going to invite Chief Constable Amanda Pearson to talk through the situation from the force perspective, the operational need. I'm then going to go to the Chief Financial Officer, Julie Strange, who prepared the paper, which was in detail, which I'm certain you've all read, to give a quick summary. And I'm going to go to Director of Operations, Adam Harold, to talk about the consultation. Because I believe, and I always have believed, that it's important to consult the public on this as far as you are able to do so. After that, we'll take questions, and then we'll see where we get to, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chief Constable for Dorset, Amanda Pearson.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, Chair. Good morning, panel. And firstly, I want to thank you for your support and your ongoing commitment in our communities as we collectively work together to make Dorset a safe county for everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss planning for the year ahead and, importantly, to reflect on the achievements over the last financial year. I see good work happening across Dorset every day, and this is constantly reflected in the positive feedback I hear from stakeholders and our communities. We all want Dorset to be a safe county for everyone. We want to deliver a fair and effective policing service to all of those who live, work and visit Dorset. And as your Chief Constable, my role is to ensure we deliver that service within our financial budget. Over the last 3 years, Dorset Police has realised just over £16 million in permanent cashable reductions, which represents over 9% of our current year total budget. This has been by no means an easy accomplishment, but it has been necessary. These savings have been delivered in a way that has largely avoided any detrimental impact on operational services. And in fact, our performance has improved in many areas. Whilst there's no doubt that resources are strained, with over 200 staff posts having been lost in this process, Dorset does remain in the top 10 safest places in the county. Overall crime continues to reduce. We are solving more crimes and ensuring the safety of tens of thousands of vulnerable adults and children. We are answering 999 calls faster and improving our response times to those who need us in an emergency. In respect of being tough on crime, in the last year, we've arrested over 8,800 suspects. We've seen a reduction in crime continue, with a 10% reduction between April and November 2025 when compared with the same period last year, which is just over 3,500 fewer victims of crime. In putting our victims and witnesses first, we've improved our positive outcome rate, that's the crimes that we solve, by over 2.5%, achieving over 7,700 positive outcomes for our victims. That's 550 more than we solved in the previous 12 months. We've kept people safe by referring 31,500 vulnerable adults and children to our multi-agency safeguarding hubs for partnership interventions. We've worked hard on our contact systems, processes, and our dedicated contact staff to ensure we consistently answer over 90% of emergency 999 calls, meeting and exceeding the national standard. We've also continued to see strong performance in the time it takes to dispatch officers in just over 3.5 minutes, maintaining the timeliness of our response to the community. Dorset Police is also performing positively against other national measures. We're reducing all violent crime offences faster than the national average, achieving a reduction of 2.7% in violent crime. That's 539 fewer victims against a national average reduction of 1.9. This year, we've also seen an 8.9% decrease on the same period of last year in the most serious violence. And when we compare that reduction of most serious violence nationally, we have the 4th lowest commission rate in the country. But we're not just reducing most serious violence, we are solving it. To date, the positive outcome rate for most serious violence is 73%. That's the 2nd best nationally. We've also seen a reduction in knife crime, with the year-to-date commission rate around 167 offences. That's nearly a 25% decrease on the same period in the last year. And again, when we compare that nationally, we have the second lowest commission rate for knife crime in the country. Last year, I recognised the growing impact of shoplifting and retail crime on our local businesses. We've continued to focus patrols in hotspot areas, streamline reporting processes, and prioritise the pursuit of prolific and repeat offenders. and made greater use of civil orders to prevent further offending. Op Shopkeeper remains our force-wide initiative targeting high crime and persistent shoplifters. This is coordinated through our Incident Resolution Centre with early engagement with the Crown Prosecution Service to secure charges and sentencing. The introduction of the new digital evidence management system has significantly improved CCTV submission, enabling quicker suspect identification and faster positive action. This has strengthened business confidence in reporting and is reflected in our performance. The year-to-date commission rate for shoplifting is around a 1.5 increase on the same period last year, but we are still well below the national increase of 5.4%. And in respect of solving shoplifting and apprehending offenders, a positive outcome rate for shoplifting is currently at 47.2%, against a national figure of 19%. But I know, and you as panel members know, that figures alone don't improve feelings of safety amongst all of our communities. So over the last year, we have also focused on providing structured and meaningful engagement with communities, and we will build on those foundations in the next year. We continue to enhance community engagement opportunities through the delivery of the mobile police station, whilst maintaining our commitment to community contact points. This police station provides greater access to policing services, particularly in our rural and outer areas, enabling individuals to report crime, share intelligence, seek crime prevention advice, and engage directly with their local policing teams. It is part of a wider engagement strategy, which seeks to provide access and engagement with policing where and how it suits our communities best. But our neighbourhood teams don't just strive to be visible and engaging, they work closely with communities and partners and other teams across our force to be effective at tackling problems of local crime and disorder and reducing antisocial behaviour. Between 2024 and 2025, we saw antisocial behaviour incidents continue to decrease, with a reduction of 10.5%. And that reduction continues into this year, with nearly 400 fewer incidents of antisocial behaviour during the period of April to November 2025, when compared to the same period 2024. Despite ongoing resourcing pressures, I have felt it important to maintain our award-winning rural crime team, who were recognised by the National Police Chiefs Council for the most innovative partnership to tackle serious and organised acquisitive crime. The team continue to work hard to fight rural crime and have delivered significant outcomes for our rural communities. They have built on previous success through strong regional and national partnership working, targeting organised criminality. Since 2022, this relatively small team has recovered over £2.8 million worth of stolen agricultural equipment and property from across the UK and across Europe, highlighting the significant financial impact of rural crime on our communities. The team have utilised intelligence-led tactics to proactively manage known offenders, resulting in arrests, stop and searches and seizures of vehicles, weapons and cash. This activity contributed to the disruption of organised crime groups impacting our rural communities, including a targeted operation that successfully deterred and prevented a planned large-scale hare coursing event, securing a conviction against a male linked to illegal hunt activity, and securing a criminal behaviour order to provide long-term prevention. Over the past year, I've also overseen other major organisational and operational developments. Following the introduction of Right Care, Right Person in April 2024, we worked closely with the Dorset Integrated Care Partnership to deliver a phased rollout over the year, and all 4 phases are now in place in Dorset. The focus now is on consolidating the partnership so that Right Care, Right Person becomes sustainable business as usual across all agencies, constantly ensuring that the community receives the right support from the most appropriate service, whilst enabling police staff to focus on delivering core policing services. We secured a second year of Home Office Action Fund support in the last year to continue intelligence-led hotspot patrols, with particular focus on town centres. Using crime data analysis, these double-crewed patrols target key locations on foot to provide a strong and visible uniformed presence. Our Keeping Town Centres Safe This Summer initiative contributed to sustained reductions in violent crime and antisocial behaviour in the majority of these areas. And this work has continued through our Winter of Action campaign. In July 2024, following a successful trial, we rolled out enhanced video response as a choice for victims contacting us. EVR is offered to all victims who don't require an immediate response, and it's their choice to determine whether they want that virtual response and when and where they want it, which significantly reduces waiting times. During 2025, we've conducted nearly 5,000 of those virtual deployments, and victim satisfaction surveys show that 93% of victims were very satisfied using EVR, and 96% would recommend EVR to a friend or colleague. We continue to work with the College of Policing to replicate EVR in other forces across the country to ensure that there are wider national benefits and the efficiencies are realised. Sadly, though, as in other years, the nature of our service also means responding to tragic events, which I see our officers and staff do with professionalism, tenacity, and compassion. This requirement and our approach to it has been seen in numerous incidents during the last year, including the murder of a male and the attempted murder of another male who were deliberately driven at, and 2 stranger rapes. After diligent and dedicated investigations into these, suspects were identified, arrested, charged, and brought to justice through the court process, bringing some resolutions for the victims' families. For a small force, we achieve great things, which is a testament to the hard work, pride, and determination of the officers, staff, and volunteers who work for Dorset Police, and our communities and partners who work with us to deliver the Police and Crime Plan, with the shared mission of making Dorset safe for everyone. Despite delivering those substantial savings and driving greater efficiency over the last 3 years, I have to tell you that the force's financial position remains extremely challenging, and further difficult choices will be needed in the months and years ahead to maintain services to the public. We strive to continue to provide good policing, but future budget forecasts place the organisation under significant strain. The year ahead will be especially difficult with a structurally constrained financial environment, most recently characterised by rising and unavoidable costs, significantly exceeding general inflation, limited scope for further efficiencies without impacting frontline delivery, increasing demand complexity, particularly with safeguarding, vulnerability, and serious violence. And as the Commissioner mentioned, a funding model that does not adequately reflect local demand drivers or the allocation of funding for nationally set pay awards, as well as additional officers currently being supported on the basis of funding formula, rather than using a measure that actually reflects our workforce costs. Whilst police reform may in time provide an opportunity to explore further cost reductions through a more coherent regional approach, this is not a new direction for us in the South West. We already work collaboratively with our colleagues in areas such as procurement and better alignment of technology, and we actively seek opportunities across the South West region to work more effectively and efficiently together. However policing is organised at a regional or national level in the future, our priority and my priority will remain to serve and connect to the people of Dorset and to continue to deliver on the Police and Crime Plan. I am grateful for the support the Commissioner has given us in continuing to challenge the Home Office around the national funding formula. As you know, we receive the lowest funding formula from the government per population than any other police force, and that accounts for less than half of our funding. The additional funding received from government for pay awards is always allocated on the funding formula basis, and as such, we continue to lose out, with the adverse impact of this pay award funding over the last 3 years alone, bringing an additional £2.8 million of pressure. In 26-27, this has been exacerbated with a further £0.4 million reduction in funding following changes to the method of grant allocation for officers under the government's maintenance grant arrangements. The formula, as I know many panel members are aware, does not recognise the significant seasonal demands we face as a coastal force, or the rural nature of large parts of our geography. As you know, the population surges significantly in the summer months, placing substantial additional pressure on policing and public services. This was evident last year in the rise of antisocial behaviour and disorder we saw on Bournemouth beaches in the early part of the summer, to which we had to dedicate additional policing at cost, both financially and the abstraction from their other roles and areas, to successfully suppress the potential for further crime and disorder, ensuring that our families could enjoy the beaches trouble-free. With our geography, our teams can be spread thinly across a large area, making it challenging to maintain visibility and responsiveness across the whole county, and ensuring that our officers feel safe and supported. This isn't recognised as a factor in the funding formula. Therefore, I have to look internally to make changes which maximise the officers and staff available for the front line. Where we can, over the last year, we have redeployed officers for patrol and neighbourhoods from other areas and completed a full review of our leadership model, which released an additional 42 posts to the front line and 15 into investigation roles. You will have seen we have intensified our recruitment campaign, focusing on a mix of new recruits and transferees. Although the initial cost of a transferee officer is higher, we see less turnover and our teams benefit from the experience and skills they bring into the force. There are costs associated with intensifying this recruitment. We have to compete with other forces who offer different financial, relocation and welfare packages to secure good candidates. But we have a duty to our communities and to our colleagues to ensure we have the right number and the right quality of people alongside them when they deliver fair and effective policing across our county. As an organisation, we are committed to continuous improvement. We are already lean, and seeking out further savings is becoming ever more challenging as all areas of our business continue to be pressed to identify savings opportunities. In the last year, those savings have included renegotiated contracts, innovative use of technology, extending life of equipment, additional income generation, and a reduction of 72 full-time equivalent police staff posts, all of whom were making a valuable contribution to keeping our county safe. Savings have also included reductions in utility costs, not least due to the considerably more efficient headquarters building at Winfrith, severe reductions in overtime, reductions in vehicle running costs, and software licensing arrangements. I do want to be clear about one thing. As the leader of Dorset Police, I simply cannot ask our remaining workforce to do more, and I cannot build a sustainable policing service based on their goodwill and discretionary effort. That simply isn't fair. Their resilience has been stretched to its limit over the last year, and we are now seeing the impact of this sustained pressure on their health and well-being. I want to be clear that I am seeking support from the Police and Crime Commissioner with the precept, primarily to reduce the level of savings required, to stabilise our workforce and to maintain the delivery of policing across Dorset. I will, of course, ensure that we continue to implement new ways of working, deliver efficiencies in our services, and savings at every opportunity. But without the increase in precept, I cannot guarantee frontline services wouldn't be impacted. If the precept was not increased, an additional shortfall of 4.7 million will be created, significantly impacting our effectiveness in delivering policing services that the people of Dorset expect and deserve. To be clear, without the precept increase, the ability to meet unavoidable pay and inflationary measures would not be achieved, which could result in my ability to protect officer and staff numbers. This could lead to a position of being unable to maintain current contact service levels, impact our policing teams and our response capability, affect the timeliness and quality of investigations, and constrain our ability to be proactive and preventative, and mean we're not equipped to respond effectively to those seasonal fluctuations. I would not be able to give you the confidence that we would be able to continue to deliver improvements in services to the public. The unavoidable fact is that even with a precept increase of £15, while allowing me to deliver core services within a balanced budget, would still require significant savings to be delivered, totaling 4.4 million. Therefore, we will continue to invest in our contact services over the next year. We're progressing the procurement of new software, which is expected to significantly improve our service to the public, reduce waiting times and demand, increase performance, and ultimately save money. We have created and will be able to maintain 2 new posts designed to improve the experience of victims in the service they receive from Dorset Police. And with the precept, we will continue with the provision of a neighbourhood watch coordinator supporting this vital function and the numerous volunteers who deliver it. We will continue to seek to improve the experience of victims, improve our response capability, and develop our focus on public engagement. Finally, you will of course be aware of the change in the provision of services to victims as a result of the new high-risk domestic abuse service, which is being delivered through the OPCC. Against this context, I have set out the operational and financial case to the Police and Crime Commissioner to ask that he supports a request for the maximum precept increase of £15. This is not a position I wanted to be in, but I will assure you that we will continue to focus on how we would want to deliver policing in the future and reflect and revise on how we do so in the current climate. I do take my responsibility to make every penny count extremely seriously. Personally chairing a monthly board that scrutinises our budget, our savings plans, and our resource allocation. Whatever level our budget is set at, I believe we hold that budget and that money on behalf of our public. And therefore, I must ensure it's spent wisely and that it actively contributes to that service to our communities. Balancing this current year's budget has taken considerable effort, commitment, and some difficult choices and decisions. Throughout the year, we've remained focused on service to the public and making progress against the Police and Crime Plan. And I remain committed to protecting those services. Whilst we have seen significant achievements within the constrained budget and decreasing resources, we're not complacent. And I will continue to strive to be one of the safest counties in the country by being tough on crime, keeping people safe, and putting victims and witnesses first. It is crucial that the public are assured that the force is making every penny count. And I am confident my team has explored all options to make efficiencies and has looked for ways to deliver savings and services in a way that maximises what's available in core budgets to deliver the very best for our communities. The cashable savings target for the current year was 6.5 million, all of which are 0.7 million has already been delivered, with plans to deliver the remainder by year end. As well as taking measures to ensure the force remains financially sustainable into the future, I must ensure my officers, staff and volunteers are properly equipped and supported in their roles through the provision of appropriate vehicles, technology and buildings. As the panel is aware, the force receives no government funding towards our capital expenditure, and there is ever more reliance on borrowing and direct contributions from the revenue budget to meet the cost of this essential investment. The force is again needing to invest more into capital financing arrangements in 26-27 to ensure we remain financially sustainable, with an additional revenue funding requirement of 0.9 million. It remains my ambition that all short life fixed assets, such as technology and vehicles, will be financed from direct revenue contributions rather than borrowing, and our chief financial officers continue to work together to achieve this. This means that borrowing is only reserved for long-term assets such as investment in the estate. The capital programme I'm proposing has been reviewed by my chief financial officer to ensure that it represents the minimum necessary to support an efficient and effective force. The 5-year programme, up to and including 2030-31, still totals 67 million, of which 31 million relates to the estates programme, including 15 million on decarbonisation and estate sustainability, which will realise further savings, revenue savings. And a further 22 million relates to essential investment in technology, partly to maintain core systems and partly to deliver future efficiencies through the contact system. Work is continuing to identify the potential cost and full implications of moving to an electrified vehicle fleet. External support has been engaged to assist us with this task, and a business case is expected in early 2026. This is a hugely complex piece of work that will ultimately reduce our carbon footprint and realise financial savings in the future. These additional costs have not yet been factored into costed plans. It remains the expectation that the infrastructure costs will be funded by borrowing, and that longer term savings will mean that the lifetime cost will be significantly mitigated. Of course, I must ensure that policing remains agile and continues to modernise to respond to changing threats. With the financial context, this means any investment into the future is less about overall resource, but more focused on how our existing workforce and assets could be better utilised to deliver services whilst developing talents and skills for the future. Looking ahead, alongside my leadership team, I'm already planning and preparing how we deliver policing in 27, 28 and beyond. The financial forecasts demonstrate we will need to make even more savings, and we are already seeking to identify how those could be met. At a national level, the only remaining conditional workforce grant arrangement is the government's neighbourhood policing grant, which we received in 25-26. This enabled me to recruit a number of police staff into key roles that had recently been carried out by police officers due to the requirement to maintain officer numbers. By recruiting those police staff, I'm able to provide greater value in delivery of those roles and release the officers into neighbourhood policing. We are told this continues into 26-27, with funding being made available for up to an additional 15 further neighbourhood posts, although the terms and conditions of that grant have not yet been provided to us by government. Whilst, of course, investment in neighbourhood policing is welcome, this naturally restricts over the coming year where savings can be delivered, creating an increased pressure on roles outside of neighbourhood policing. Either way, even with a 15% precept increase, there is no room for further growth in the budget. With a maximum precept increase of £15, a total of 4.4 million of cost savings will still be required, as I mentioned, to enable me to deliver a balanced budget in 26-27. Those savings will include savings in the use of our estate through reductions in spend on utilities and maintenance, continued reductions in software licensing and vehicle fuel efficiencies, reduction in uniform costs, reducing things like spend on meals in custody, changes in processes and maximising use of technology where we can, and delivering savings across our collaborations with other forces. whilst every effort will be taken to minimise the impact on the service we deliver, we will not be able to improve our performance to the public at the pace we had hoped to, or in all of the areas we had hoped to, had we received a better financial settlement from government. We will have to make choices about where we strive for our improvements within our budget and people constraints. We would deliver the existing services with fewer resources, using technology as planned to reduce costs where we can. But it does limit our ability to respond to new and emerging threats, such as the ever-expanding cybercrime and online challenges. To fully close the budget gap in 26-27, we will need to go further still and have identified further savings. Those savings will impact on financial sustainability, increased reliance on future borrowing, and increased financial risk. We have ongoing performance and efficiency reviews across every function, and those will continue to drive out efficiencies for the force. But there is now limited ability to remove further posts without a clear impact on service. The further savings include some reduction of further staff posts, restructure of pension contributions, putting additional pressure on future years, restructuring our capital financing, again putting emphasis on the need to borrow and then increasing cost in future years, reduced ability to mitigate future risk using reserves, and a greater reliance on investment in technology. As you know, Dorset Police are currently within the bottom 7 forces in the country in terms of ongoing financial sustainability, with forecasts of challenging budget gaps in each future years. Whilst helping to address the financial challenges the force faces, the precept funding could also enable some continued innovation and development in the way our services are provided. And we will continue to drive activity and performance and ensure it's rigorously monitored, linking with our vision, purpose, and priorities. Focusing on good standards of investigation, achieving those outcomes for the public, maximising opportunities to bring offenders to justice, robustly managing those who present a risk, delivering a quality service through the victim's journey, targeting harm affecting our communities, specifically violence against women and girls, most serious violence and neighbourhood harm. Ensuring we proportionately use our police powers, create a workforce and leaders that are representative of our communities, enhance our capacity through innovation, maximising resources that are available to respond to incidents and crime, deliver effective call handling services, and ensure the well-being of our people. We'll continue to invest in our enhanced video response and triage and assessment processes in public contact. We will embed the National Digital Evidence Management System, which is a requirement to improve interoperability with the Crown Prosecution Service and the courts. By focusing on productivity, largely through automation and use of technology, we'll release further hours available for frontline services, improving their performance. We will continue to expand the reach of the mobile police station based on feedback and requirements from stakeholders and our communities. We will continue to use Project Evolve to oversee the Forces Transformation Programme, bringing together all of our change activity so that we can move towards 2030. The next phase of work will focus on enabling the force to prioritise the use of resources effectively, put those victims first, increase visibility within communities, and remain relentless in the pursuit of criminality. We will also continue to work towards reducing those killed or seriously injured on Dorset roads and building on the work with our community Speed Watch, which now has over 1,300 volunteers and is integral to our strategy to keep our roads safe and reduce harm. I appreciate, panel, that's a huge amount of detail. And I hope what you have heard is that despite the financial challenges ahead, I remain committed to protecting service to the public through efficiencies, technology and modernisation. But this must be underpinned by an appropriate, realistic and sustainable budget. With a precept increase of £15, I can give you more confidence. I can continue to deliver the police and crime plan, reducing crime, supporting victims and keeping people safe, to ensure Dorset remains one of the safest places in England and Wales. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my officers, my staff, and all of our volunteers for the truly extraordinary efforts they have put in over the last year. It is their dedication, their commitment, and their passion for making Dorset safe for everyone that allows us to achieve great things despite our challenges. I remain deeply proud to lead them and honoured to work alongside them. I would also like to thank the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Police and Crime Panel for your continued support and for the opportunity today to set out both our achievements and the very real challenges we faced in an honest, but I hope constructive way. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much indeed, Chief Constable. What I'm going to do is do the 3 presentations and then take all the questions en masse. So if I can now pass across to Judy Strange, my Chief Financial Officer. And Judy's role is to reassure me around the robustness of the budget. So, Judy.
Thank you. As both the Chair and the Commissioner have mentioned, this has been quite a challenging budget to pull together because most of the key detail from government was not received until after the initial paper deadline for this agenda. I'd like to just start by saying how grateful I've been for the support of both the monitoring officer and the flexibility of democratic services to give me a bit extra time to prepare the report to make sure that it was based on the latest information available and still obviously published on time. Since publication of the report, no further information has been received, so the report remains accurate and up to date. In particular, the details around the neighbourhood policing grant and how that will work have not been shared. We think this is unlikely to be received until much closer to the financial year end. The budget proposed, including the precept request before you today, is a balanced budget. It does not rely on the use of reserves to cover ongoing costs, and the assumptions used are reasonable. The use of the priority-based budgeting process and the following performance and efficiency reviews mean that the vast majority of savings are fully developed and in the process of being delivered. There are 2 savings which do affect financial sustainability, where the revenue contribution to the capital programme and the contribution to the insurance reserve have had to be reduced. Whilst these are not ideal in terms of the long-term aim of improving financial resilience, they are relatively modest reductions, and we will look to mitigate against these reductions as we go through the financial year. Overall, I've been able to assure the Police and Crime Commissioner that the overall budget as proposed is robust. The second area where I must provide a view is around the adequacy of reserves. The aim is to maintain the general reserve to between 3% and 5% of the net revenue expenditure. The general reserve level at the 31st of March 2026 is forecast to be at 3.3% prior to any year-end variance. There are also planned contributions to the reserve across the medium-term financial plan, which would take that general reserve up to 3.45% by the end of 26-27 and 3.62% by the end of 29-30. The use of earmarked reserves within the proposed budget are to fund once-off expenditure items and are for the purposes for which they are set aside. Therefore, taking both of those factors into account, I can also confirm that the overall level of reserves is adequate.
Thank you very much indeed, Judy. The next presentation is to me one of the most important ones, because I've always believed that when you're going to set a budget, you should ask the people and you should be realistic as to what the parameters are. So what I'm going to do is ask Adam to take us through the consultation, and then we're going to basically open it up for questions on all of those three areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, panel. I'll now share information about the public consultation that ran between the 27th of November last year and the 26th of January. I'm sure members will have visited the Commissioner's website and survey over the last month or so. And you'll be aware that those were preceded with a page of supporting information and have been accompanied by social media, news and public relations activity to help explain the context surrounding the issue. It's also important to note that, although the survey is closed, the process of updating the public does not cease. Ongoing scrutiny and discussion about the budget will continue, including today, of course, and communications activity will follow. For example, a leaflet will be provided with key information about the budget for all ratepayers to ensure transparency and the public is kept informed. As is customary, the OPCC activity in support of the consultation included attendance at face-to-face engagement events across the county. This year, that involved 9 roadshow sessions. For further context, PCCs are not required to undertake a survey, and indeed a number do not. And of those who do, you'll see a variety of different methods of engagement across the country. And while it's accepted that there are a range of views about survey methodologies, we believe that we've taken a proportionate approach that compares well with those in other areas. This year, we received a total of 1,653 responses to the consultation. When it comes to surveys, it's useful to consider sample size. So as I do each year, I invite anyone interested to have a look at online sample size calculators. There are a variety of those freely available on the web. According to the SurveyMonkey survey size calculator, with this many respondents, we can be 99% confident that the margin of error on these results is within just over plus or minus 3%. In terms of the questions then, the headline data is included at sections 7.1 through 7.4 of the budget paper. I think that's pages 18 and 19 of the pack for ease of reference, but I will now summarise. The first question remained the same as last year and was, do you agree that Dorset Police requires additional funding? 74% responded yes, 26% no. For your reference, last year that figure stood at 76 to 24, the year before at 75 to 25. So as you can see, a consistent picture. In terms of the second question, this read as follows. Bearing in mind the information detailed regarding the need to increase the amount of funding raised through precept, which of the following options do you feel is most appropriate? Then there were 3 options, a £14 increase, a £20 increase, a £26 increase. For £14, that's 38% of respondents, £20, that's 16%, and £26, that was 46%. So a key takeaway is that a majority of respondents, so 62%, opted for an amount above the maximum amount the PCC is able to propose, with not far off half of all respondents opting for the highest amount, which was £26. Of course, there are a few other things to note about this question. As set out at section 7.4 of the budget paper, the £14 precept option, which is listed in the question, reflected the best intelligence of what the limit might be at the time of the launch of the precept consultation, given it reflected the limit for 25-26. It was therefore decided it was appropriate to consult on that lower option of £14. However, the referendum principle, as we know, was later confirmed as £15 on the 17th of December by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in the Local Government Provisional Finance Settlement. Members will also be aware that this second question adopts a different format to previous years, and so direct comparisons cannot be made of the answers from prior years. The question was changed in part following feedback from this very panel, but of course also because we wish to be transparent with the public about the financial challenges that the force faces. As councillors, you may be interested in whether there are any differences in responses from different areas of the county. The survey is recently closed, so this will need some additional exploration, but I can provide some headlines. In terms of the first question, BCP respondents appeared to be ever so slightly more likely to agree that Dorset Police requires additional funding compared to Dorset Council respondents. And similarly, BCP residents was again slightly more likely to support £26. With that said, it's important to stress that all areas of the county appear to have aligned with the overall results. In other words, clearly agreeing that the force needs additional funding and with a majority supporting options above the precept limit. So this is only a broad summary, but I hope it provides a useful synopsis of this year's consultation.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically now throw it open to the questions from the panel. And please take this opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for all of the speeches, and thank you, Chief, for your impassioned words and commitment to the people of Dorset. I will now go to the panel members. We have a number of questions that have been submitted in advance. You'll find these in the workbook that Mark sent out just prior to the meeting. The first question we have is from Councillor Rampton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentations so far. So the report identifies that the £1 million funding for visible policing hotspots is not present. How do you propose that the positive outcomes from OpTrack can be maintained? And you'll be aware that in my particular ward, it's been very useful and appreciated. Thank you.
Well, thank you indeed for the question. I'm very clear that I'm a huge advocate of hotspot policing. In fact, Dorset Police started doing it before it became a thing and a grant-funded thing. What we do know is, as the Chief said, that hotspot funding allowed us to bring more people into it to allow us to do a better performance. We know that's not going to be continued. This is one of the few grants that was not distributed on the basis of funding formula. So that allowed us to basically increase the amount of policing that could be undertaken, delivering 1,983 hours of patrols from the 1st of April to the 31st December last year. What I'm clear about is that this needs to continue. And one of the elements which will help it continue is a small portion of the funding from the last 2 years has been used to create an app used to set out foot patrol routes and local intelligence for officers, help them record patrols and outcomes, including the use of police powers. And this is going to be, this data, this mechanism is going to be absolutely fundamental to how the hotspot patrols are taken forward and monitored. We know that they work. We've seen reductions in antisocial behaviour, and whilst the data for the current year is still being evaluated, we know that the previous year, reduction in ASB was achieved in 2/3 of the hotspot areas. There's clear evidence this approach should therefore be built into the neighbourhood policing team's business as usual. It'll be balanced with all the other priorities. Increase in funding for enhancing the neighbourhood teams and the neighbourhood policing guarantee is significantly less than the 1 million previously received for hotspot policing. Therefore, the discussion will be about how we move resources from other levels and other places in order to maintain it. Chief, do you want to say anything about that this time? It's difficult because the neighbourhood policing guarantee rules aren't known, but.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the question. There's a very strong evidence base around hotspot policing, and as the Commissioner mentioned, we had built that into our neighbourhood patrols before the grant, and that will continue as part of directed neighbourhood policing. The advantage with the app is that, which means that in terms of directed patrols, so I mentioned proactive and preventative policing, that means that when we have got the opportunity to put officers or PCSOs into that preventative, proactive patrols, we can be very directed about where they go, how much time they spend there, what they do, what the intelligence is, and we can also track and monitor what the outcomes of that is in terms of the impact on local crime and disorder. So we will continue with that way of working, whilst we might not be able to draw as many of our officers and PCSOs into those patrols over the forthcoming year. It will remain an essential part of our neighbourhood policing.
From a commitment point of view, Antisocial behaviour before I was PCC was not something which was on the agenda for Dorset Police. It now firmly is. This is part of business as usual. It is a fundamental part of the Police and Crime Plan. I will be holding to account to make certain that it happens.
Councillor Rampton. Please.
Is it working? Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Are you suggesting that because there's an app in use, that it's really important that the community continue to report all incidences because that will then focus the resource into that area?
Absolutely right. It's something I say at every residents' meeting. It's something that I know that the force says at every meeting they have. Is absolutely vital to report. Report drives two things. It drives intelligence, so the force understands what's happening, but it also drives allocation of resources, because if it's not reported, then resources won't be dedicated to it.
Chair, may I just... It has been an issue in part of my ward that residents have reported, but if they've put 3 instances on one email, for example, it's treated as one. So are you aware of this, and are there plans to change that so that residents don't have to report each incident separately, which obviously is time consuming and actually counterproductive because it puts them off doing that?
Thank you. I wasn't aware that was happening. I don't know if the chief has a comment on it.
I'd have to look into that, but what I would say is we are consistently scrutinised around our crime data integrity, which includes accurately recording antisocial behaviour incidents and ensuring that we do so for each incident that is recorded. And we achieve very high scores in terms of compliance with that integrity. So that shouldn't be the case. Those should be recorded as 3 separate antisocial behavioural incidents. But of course, we can look into that. One of the things I will say is with the removal of the grant, one of the benefits it does bring, and I like to be a bit glass half full, is that there were constraints around the definitions of a hotspot set with that grant as part of the conditions, which didn't always allow us to respond to the areas that we know are hotspots at different times of the year and to be a bit more flexible. And our neighbourhood teams know that, and they know that because of the information that you and your communities provide. So as long as they continue to do that, we will be able to be more responsive to those areas that we know are hotspots locally for Dorset.
Councillor Rampton, if you want to write to me with specific examples, then I'll take that forward.
Moving on, if there are no supplementals, to a question raised by Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. Where does the PCC believe that the efficiency savings can be found? And what are the consequences on operational policing if those efficiency savings cannot be fully achieved?
Well, thank you very much indeed for the question. I think some of that was answered in the Chief's presentation earlier, but I will also give some thought to it. Given that around 85% of Dorset Police's budget is on direct workforce costs, which includes pay and pension contributions, the vital element for me has been the instigation over the last couple of years of the Project Evolve, which is the force's continuing programme to equip the force to serve the public. Now, part of that was to look at, for example, supervisory ratios. Have we got the right balance between inspectors and sergeants and frontline police constables, for example? And that needed to happen. This wholesale leadership review meant that we built a new operating model to optimise and reduce the number of supervisory ranks. That means that there will be savings ongoing coming forward from that. But phase 2 for that is now in place, and that's going to drive further iterative improvements through until 2030. Some of the areas looked at include reducing or removing vacant posts that are not critical or where operational impact is limited, and the work can be delivered differently. Now, one of the things which has been a benefit in the settlement is the removal of the cap on police officers and the fining around that in order to allow a more balanced workforce to be used. Identifying where process efficiencies can be realized through artificial intelligence or robotic process automation. We can really grip that. We reduce bureaucracy, we reduce double keying, which means that there's more time for officers and staff to serve the public. There has been a huge push on this. I remember 5 years ago going out on a call with 2 officers, 15 minutes to get to the call, 15 minutes at the call, 15 minutes back, at least 15 minutes each for them to use a desktop computer to write it up. There have been huge moves in order to address bureaucracy, in order to address things like that. We can take that further. Also, and the chief alluded to this, we work collaboratively in the Southwest. We've got one of the best collaborations between the regional forces. So we're looking at reviewing income generation with other partners. And we believe there's further collaboration opportunities with them, and also commercial opportunities through considering utilities, licensing, those sorts of things, and other supplier contracts, which whilst we've made progress, we can probably move in other areas also, so that we take advantage of regional and national procurement. We've also finally, in the last year, got to the stage where we've been able to have a rigorous good look at the alliance budgets through priority-based budgeting. And this basically has looked at releasing funding from that in order to support savings. But it's also a philosophy. It's a business philosophy, which I'm really pleased that we're now adopting. And that is now moving forward into the Dorset force with productivity efficiency reviews, which focus solely on Dorset areas of business. And I believe the first one of those is well underway. In terms of the impact on operational policing, should these efficiencies not be found, that's hypothetical and very difficult for me to answer. What I will say is if we can't find efficiencies and continued efficiencies going forward, and we do not have the penny dropping in government about the need to address the national funding formula, then it will be very difficult to preserve frontline services. That's the situation we're currently in. It is very difficult to keep rearranging the same deck chairs if we can't have significant funding. From a police and crime plan, I have a clear view on what we need to prioritize and keep going. And it is the things which the people of Dorset ask about. And no doubt we may get into that later. Whatever I can say, whatever's happened in the past, Dorset Police now has a tightly controlled process that oversees its productivity and efficiency delivery. My office has good engagement with this process, including being specifically consulted each time a vacancy is proposed for deletion within the force, along with any potential repercussions on the police and crime plan delivery, and how importantly, will that vacancy be mitigated. This is now very much an established process and will continue. So whilst I can't say what would happen in a hypothetical future, and I hope to God we don't get that, I can say what the process will be to ensure it's fully understood and mitigated and where the priorities will be.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Canavan, would you like to respond?
Well, I mean, it's just I'm not going to get into the debate about national funding formula because you've heard my views about that before. But are you confident that the savings that you've just described in outline will meet the point that the Chief Constable made in her report, that even with £15, she's still looking at £4.4 million worth of savings?
If we could make responses succinct, just so that we can cover all the questions, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Given the rigour of the budgetary process, given the focus that my office has given to it, yes, I am confident that's absolutely right.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question, which has been raised by Councillor Sidaway.
Thank you. I'm comfortable that the Chief Constable actually answered most of this in her presentation, and between the Chief and the Commissioner, I think it's been answered. But I would like to ask for one point of clarification, if I may, and that's on the scale of the savings. Councillor Canavan just mentioned the 4.4 million that was mentioned by the Chief Constable, but, and apologies if I've missed this in the report, Julie, but I don't see the 4.4 million spelt out in there. And I think I thought the gap was a different number.
I'm just going to hand over to Julie on that one.
Yep, so there's two elements of savings covered in the report that add up to the 4.4. So there's the savings and efficiencies identified from paragraph 4.13 onwards to 4.16. So that's all of the things about priority-based budgeting, etc. And then there's the additional 1.5 million savings that are left over once we get to the end of that in order to balance the budget at the end. So it's the two combined come to the 4.4 million.
Sorry, just where was the 1.5?
The 1.5 is paragraphs 4.17 to 4.22.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment, Commissioner?
I think that most of my comment was on the thing which Councillor Sidaway said had already been covered by the Chief's presentation. So no is the answer.
That's brilliant. So thank you for the responses there. We'll move on to the next question, which was raised again by Councillor Canavan.
One of those questions which I suspect I might know the answer to, but what are the implications of the removal of police numbers uplift scheme restrictions, and what impacts will that have on police numbers?
Okay, well, it's a little early to say what the actual implication will be, given that we're still waiting the delivery and reporting requirements of the initiative. But look, we're very clear. We welcome this removal of the scheme restrictions. You'll have heard me talk before at the panel that this has been a constraint, which means that we can't have the force in the way that it needs to be. It constrains the Chief Constable's ability to move it around. What it's meant for us in Dorset by having this constraint is we've had to lose over 70 skilled and experienced police staff through the mutually agreed resignation scheme. Plus, we've had to manage reductions in PCSOs, control room and contact services staff, and numerous other staff posts by not recruiting to the roles which have become vacant. As you heard, this has meant the perverse thing where we have police officers picking up that work. So how is it sensible to remove a police staff member who is probably highly experienced in that work and possibly at a lesser pay grade than the officer that you have to force in to do the work? It doesn't make any sense. It's not sustainable. So we hope that this new approach will address it and rebalance the workforce mix in a much better way. I know how much communities, for example, value PCSOs. And rearranging this has been one of the most frustrating things that has happened whilst this constraint has been in place. I've spoken about that because I've been close to it and talking to it. Amanda, would you like to offer a further view?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the question. Yes, we do welcome the removal of this restriction. It's worth noting we still have to meet that number for the end of this year. And because we've had almost quite late notification around that, we yet don't have fully developed plans about what that workforce mix might look like towards the back end of 26, 27. But it does give us the option, particularly looking at that 1.5 million that Julie talked about looking at other ways of managing the workforce mix. The one thing I will say, though, is we know that in order to remain visible, connected and effective, we need a certain number of police officers and PCSOs, and we need them to be within our communities. So our work has been focused on where we can recruit those police staff into roles, releasing police officers back into those frontline roles, rather than necessarily cashing those in as savings. And that would remain my focus as much as I can do to improve that service and improve those feelings of safety amongst our communities.
Thank you for the question and the responses. We will now move on to Councillor Ramsden. I do apologise.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about police numbers, if I may.
Yeah, be my guest.
I can't find it in the report at the moment, but there was an extra sum of money, was it about 450,000, which I think said would provide 15 extra neighbourhood police roles. But I wondered, is that a one-off? So is that sustainable? And what about the advertising and recruitment cost? Does that have to come out of another budget?
Thank you for the question. That's part of that neighbourhood policing guarantee. So we are yet to see the full terms and conditions of that. In terms of the proportion of the national funding that's been made available for neighbourhood policing grant, that is our portion that we may recruit up to the equivalent of 15 police officers to be dedicated to neighbourhoods. But we are yet to see the terms and conditions of that grant, the duration of that grant. So we remain focused on delivering the uplift in our neighbourhood teams, but we do need to be cautious about how we invest that money going forward. In your question around recruitment costs, those have to come from our budget. And as I mentioned in my speech, in terms of being able to attract recruits and transferees, we have had to invest in our attraction and recruitment campaigns. We have had to be competitive around our relocation offer and our wellbeing offer so that we can get good quality candidates into Dorset. Those for me are short-term costs and pressures, which we anticipate we will see the benefit from the increase in our workforce and the good quality officers that we attract from other forces.
Thank you for the answer and the question. We will now move on to a question raised by Councillor Wood.
Thank you. So previous years have identified a funding gap, but the Commissioner's been able to deliver on its key priorities. What are the implications of the 26-27 funding gap on delivering on the police and crime plan?
Thank you. And yes, I am tremendously proud of the actions Dorset Police and my office have taken in previous years to protect the police and crime plan delivery in the face of reducing budgets and increasing demand. But you're right to suggest that position is not infinitely achievable. The police and crime plan was put in place to radically change the way that Dorset Police connected to its public. It's got a clear strategy, a focus on the mission and consistent priorities. Each of those are checked every year that they still fit with the public. And so it's got crime fighting at its heart. You will have heard from the Chief earlier, hit some of the things which I know matter to people. Talked about rural crime, talked about shoplifting, talked about antisocial behaviour. Those three elements weren't consistently being discussed at this panel in the years before I became Police and Crime Commissioner. They are now. Now, the focus has to be on how do we keep everything spinning in the light of the financial situation. Previously, delivery has been smoothed through a combination of efficiency savings, careful financial management, and the use of reserves to manage short-term pressures. This next year is challenging in a number of important aspects. Firstly, the scale and persistence of the funding gap means there is now far less flexibility in the system. And I will be blunt, this is what happens when you have a funding formula which perversely affects forces for years and years and years. Many of the efficiencies that could be achieved without impacting delivery have already been taken. So further savings carry a risk of affecting capacity rather than just improving efficiency. So that's why my office has the focus. That's why I mentioned earlier, if a vacancy is going to be removed, there is clear discussion with me and my office about the implications for the policing crime plan. We remain resolute, the Chief and I, on protecting the core priorities. We'll continue to work to align the budgets as best we can, and we'll make the difficult choices where we have to prioritise. A good example that members will be aware of is the conscious decision the Chief and I agreed to prioritise emergency call response. If you remember, about a couple of years ago, our 999 call response wasn't where it should be. So we had to prioritise that over non-emergency call response performance. And that is something we talk at the panel virtually every meeting. That's not to say those calls are regarded as lesser importance. Far from it. They are a key source of the local intelligence I was speaking to Councillor Rampton about, because they enable the criminals to be brought to justice and victims protected. But we don't have sufficient resources to do everything all the time in the way that we want to do it. So the implication of the budget gap on future delivery will be slower progress against some longer term ambitions. So whilst I would love to have a magic wand to wave over the secondary call handling, that will mean that it will progress, but it will progress less quickly than I would desire it to. We know that increased pressure will occur on support functions that underpin frontline delivery. That obviously could directly affect performance. We'll have reduced resilience in the system. And we've got significant and growing pressures on our workforce. The panel saw a workforce paper not 2 meetings ago, I think. So we are aware that this pressure manifests itself in higher than average sickness absence rates. What I'm also clear about is if we have less resilience, we will have to call for mutual aid more often, which costs us. And we cannot rely on the government to reimburse that. So that causes an additional problem. Overall, I'm very clear. The police and crime plan is the right thing. It's working. We've gone from 10th safest to 5th safest. We will prioritise the parts of the police and crime plan which matter the most to the people of Dorset and which give the best delivery. That's the commitment I will give you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have a supplemental?
Yeah, if I could, just hopefully short one.
Just briefly in terms of question and answer.
Thank you for that response, Commissioner. Just in terms of where you're saying that you'll prioritize the parts of the plan that you hear or believe the public want you to, or that they need, does that mean that you're going to have to look at the plan with a bit more flexibility than you probably would want to, or in terms of where you're actually putting your efforts rather than doing the whole thing?
No, it means I'm going to be slower to achieve the objectives in some of the areas. Like I would like secondary call handling to be fixed by now. That's the classic example. That's the one that we constantly talk about. I would like the ability to reassure the public by having more visibility of police officers through the community contact points, the mobile police stations. But again, that is all to do with resource. Now, if we've got a choice to prioritise reducing antisocial behaviour through hotspot policing or having another mobile police station, you can see which way it's going to go. So that's my point, is there are some things which are going to be slower. There are some things I would love to do but can't do at this moment in time. And all this could be fixed. All this could be fixed in a heartbeat by just a bit of sensibility up top. But thank you.
Thank you for the answer and the question. We'll move on to an advanced question from Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Commissioner, what level of confidence is there on the assumptions in the report? This is at 8.1 on the council tax levels up until 2030. We know what the ask of the public is for this coming financial year at £15, yet the assumption beyond that sits at £10 per year. Is that because of a lack of government clarity or flexibility, or is that your sincere hope?
Thank you. Really, really good question. There's two elements to forecasting council tax: the increase in the tax base and the referendum limits, which you refer to. In terms of the tax base, this has been around 1% for a number of years. However, there's still some concern that the full impact of the second homes premium and the resulting reductions in second homes has been felt. This is based on the experience of Welsh authorities when this policy was introduced. Both local authorities take slightly different views and different approaches to factoring in the second home premiums. Therefore, a prudent average assumption is 0.7%, which would be used in the central case forecast. So that's one level of council tax assumption. In terms of the referendum principles, you're absolutely right. We're working on best guess assumptions. We know in the last CSR, the assumption of £10 was used as the maximum. We didn't know what we were going to get this time around, and we got the 15 out of the blue. There's no further confirmations on assumptions. We have no idea where it's going to go, and therefore we have to be prudent. And my desire is to take the less amount of money off the people of Dorset, but to balance that, we need to keep the people safe. And that's the dilemma I'm in every year. I'd love it to be £10 or less. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what the situation is when we get there next year. It would be better and more sensible if we had multi-year arrangements. We don't. In fact, we don't know what we're getting until the week before Christmas. It doesn't help. But thank you very much for the question.
Councillor Gibson, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. It's probably more a point with a question mark at the end. It seems like the government is continually being dishonest with local forces about what realistically their budget composition is going to be. We know in Dorset that we spend far too much as a percentage in comparison to other forces off the back of local taxation as opposed to national funding. Setting that gripe aside, it's a gripe that we also have here at Dorset Council, and I'm sure BCP are the same. It sounds like there's more work for the government to do in trying to provide that multi-year certainty, because we've now got to the point where the 5% is clearly above the £10 annual charge. So if council tax rises are realistically going to be at 5%, don't you think it's time for the government to be honest about it?
Briefly, please.
Oh, well, that's fun. Yeah.
No, that was a statement rather than a question, but I will allow a comment.
Sorry, I think the honest could be more honest about a lot of things. I think they could be more honest when they say X billion pounds more for policing, when that doesn't actually translate for us as an actual, increase the way that we would expect it to be. I think it is dishonest to assume when they make those announcements that all police and crime commissioners take the highest amount of the precept that they allow. I think it is dishonest to, in some cases, then say, oh, you can apply for extra, but you have to put it on the precept. I think it's dishonest to have a funding formula where 7 forces make a profit, and 7 forces, as you heard earlier, are basically at high risk from the point of view of financial resilience. I think that's disgusting.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will move on at that point to the final advanced question that was raised by Councillor Sinaway.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and ask this in a way that allows a yes or no answer to keep things moving, if that helps. So looking at a budget of this size, and then looking at the risks, they seem fairly generic. And I think we would be used to understanding that there would be a more detailed risk register behind this with the likelihood and impact. So our assumption is that there is that level of detail. It just can't be shared at this point.
Correct. And as you heard earlier, there's also still some moving parts which we need to work through and deal with. But, yeah.
Okay, thank you members for the submitted questions and the very comprehensive range of answers from the team to my left. I'm conscious we have overrun slightly, but due to the critical nature of this element of the meeting, I am willing to take a couple more questions from the floor if members have. Councillor Wood, I think we're going for speed, brevity and succinctness, both in the questions and the answers. Be my guest.
Yeah, thank you. Just hopefully a quick question. On the detailed 2026-2027 budget requirement, I think it's page 25 on the agenda here. There is the section with the police officer overtime and the staff overtime. That seems to spike up in the draft plan. For example, the police officer overtime's gone from 3,488 to 4,4034. But then afterwards it drops down again. I'm just wondering what's happening with that spike there.
I'll come to. Yeah, do you want to take the next question and we'll just have it?
Okay, so while we are just reviewing that question, we'll go to Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is probably for Adam on elements of the consultation. Noting and agreeing with the 74% of people that say that policing in Dorset does need some additional funding, I'd be interested to know or have a bit of clarification on the nature of the question, which is in essence in two parts. The question is, do you think Dorset Police needs more funding? I assume that was a binary yes or no. Then the subsequent question leads you on to, therefore, which of these three options do you think are the most appropriate? And that was from £14 up to £26. It strikes me that there's a huge gap there in what a lot of the public would feel. I know it's what I would feel, which is that I believe Dorset Policing needs more funding, but I don't believe it should come entirely from local taxation. And I am therefore not given the option to ask for a below 5% referendum limit figure. It strikes me if you wanted to get better detail from the public about what they think, you should allow them a range of questions about how they think it should be funded, but also give them the opportunity to go below the £14, now £15 figure. Because if, like the majority of the public, you think policing needs more funding, you have no way to say, but therefore I agree with less than £15. And therefore, I would be cautious about using that as a mandate for this rise.
Yeah, thank you. We obviously discussed the survey in depth before we went out, but the Commissioner's decision was that providing people with an option that he didn't feel was on the table could be perceived in some way to be disingenuous. And part of that was feedback we had from the panel last year, that we were providing options which we knew when we looked at it that would not be a prudent and sensible position for the force. So we totally understand that point. We felt that in the way it was communicated and the preface that was made quite clear, and that the question is phrases which do you think is most appropriate. But we do accept there will be some people who would want to say something else, and therefore we haven't been able to collect that view. In previous years, you may recall, we did ask a question about the potential for lobbying the government, but again, that created an uncertainty in that there were some people that potentially felt that it was an option for the Commissioner to say, no, I won't raise the precept, but I will just go and ask for some more money from government and be received. So there is a balance to be struck. And again, we understand that in that to have the more detailed conversation, we would then come back to you saying we've spoken to maybe 50, 55 people. And that's always a trade-off as well, to get some sense of volume, to try to keep it simplistic and keep it straightforward. But of course, we have that conversation, understand the points.
Very, very, very briefly.
I do think, though, that there is, because what Adam said is absolutely right. After feedback from the panel last time, we wanted to be as completely transparent about the reality as we possibly could. But I think there is something about having the question in there after the first question is, where do you think the funding should come from? Because I think that would be really, and that will actually help me continue with my fight to get better funding. So thank you for that point.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Do we have an answer for Councillor Wood?
Yes, thank you. Apologies, I didn't have the detail in front of me. Just in terms of the changes in that overtime profile, that is in part due to the number of bank holidays in the year of 26-27. But there are also some areas where we're still carrying vacancies where we have slightly increased our overtime budget, and that is in the areas, the core areas around contact. And we anticipate we still have some vacancies in our officers in front line. And so we've made sure that our budgets are realistic in terms of those. But if you go back over the last 3 years, we've significantly reduced overtime costs across Dorset Police.
Okay, I hope that answers your question adequately. I think we will close questions at that point. I hope we have addressed all members' concerns around the budget report. We will now move to vote on the precept. The recommendation within the PCC's report is for the Police and Crime Panel to support the PCC's proposal to increase the precept for 26-27 to £102,014,893, equivalent to a Band D charge of £322, an increase of £15 per year, or £1.25 per month to residents. I will go to each member of the panel and ask each member whether they support or do not support the recommendation. Councillor Rampton.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered if, before we get to that, if I could ask a question, please, about one of the options.
Yeah, I will take a question on clarity of the process.
Going off. My question is, what would the consequences be if the panel were to support, but with clarification? Is that the same as support? Would we have to wait until July, or could there be an earlier meeting convened? Or could clarification be available by the reserve date that we already have? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I wonder if that may be best in terms of what will be provided as the clarification. I'd like to get a feel from the PCC and the CFO.
Okay, my chief executive has a couple of comments on that, so we'll go to him, and then I'll play sweeper.
Thank you. I'll defer to panel colleagues on the mechanics of the meeting, but it's our understanding that the options in front of panel members today are to support or to not support. The matter of clarity, we can provide that, but it's not contingent. So the support, it's either support or not support. There's no support with options. We will endeavour, as we always do, to provide what information we can whenever we can. So the hope is that we can certainly be able to provide that by the next panel meeting, although there is some caveats around that because as the CFO has advised previously, in previous years, some of the information that has come through in about June. So potentially it might not be available for the July panel meeting, but certainly we will endeavour to push forward any information that the panel seeks as soon as we have it available. But as I understand it, the options are support or not support, but I'll defer to panel colleagues and potentially the monitoring officer on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yeah, I confirm exactly what Mr. Bullock has said. So your options today are to support or to not support. Any points of clarification would follow at a later time.
On that note, what I was considering was if we feel there are still questions, clarity around implications of this budget, my leaning was towards having a budget update at the following meeting in July, provided there was adequate information between now and then to justify it. So that would be in place of a key line of inquiry paper. We would have an implication report. I have Councillor Canavan and then Jonathan Mayer.
Thank you, Chair. That comment is not very helpful, actually, in terms of allowing me to make a decision. I understand it's accurate, by the way, but it doesn't really help. Just following up Councillor Rampton's point, I mean, I did ask that question before this meeting as to whether the reserve date, in 2 weeks' time, would allow us any flexibility at all, and the advice was that probably wouldn't help shifting it by 2 weeks. And given what the finance officer has said, we might be at Easter before we actually get any kind of detail at all. So I can kind of understand that. But faced with the choice between supporting and not supporting, I'm really struggling. Not because I don't think you deserve the £15, because when I filled the survey in, I ticked the box which said, you deserve more money. But as Councillor Gibson mentioned, it didn't offer me the opportunity of saying how much more or where that should come from. And I personally felt the options of £20 and £26 were entirely unrealistic, because in my head, there was no way in which this government would support either of those. That's a personal view. So I struggle because there is so much, and this is not anybody's fault, by the way, but there is so much concern for me in not having the understanding of the consequences of this, because we simply don't have the information. It really troubles me to support it in a situation when I don't know answers to critical questions about what the impact of this is going to be on the communities which we represent. So that's where I struggle. So whilst I understand there is no support with reservation, I get that. It just makes it more difficult for me to support it.
Thank you for the comment, Patrick. And I will hear from Jonathan Mayer.
Yeah, good morning, members. Jonathan Mayer, Director of Legal and Democratic at Dorset Council, but also your monitoring officer this morning. Just to say that I agree with the Commissioner's Chief Executive. You have to make a decision based on the information that's before you this morning. You can't make a sort of contingent decision based on something that you might learn about in the future. So unsatisfactory as it will seem to you, you've got to make that decision on the best information that you've got here this morning. There is still an opportunity, if you need anything more from the Commissioner or from the Commissioner's team, to get better information here and now. But then that choice is straightforwardly for you. Do you support this this budget, this precept level, or are you going to oppose it? And the point of the reserve date meeting is that if you do not support the budget and you do not support it in sufficient numbers that you effectively veto that budget, that meeting is to enable the Commissioner to come back and to present you with an alternative precept proposal. That's the point. That's the point of that date. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that clarify with members the options available? Councillor Sidaway.
Sorry, just want to pick up on that. I was thinking the same thing along the lines of the veto, is that I'm uncomfortable, like Patrick, supporting something when there is less detail than we would want, and I'm sure that Julie would want to present to us. We all understand the reasons why. However, I've never quite understood, I didn't understand last year when we had this debate, we tried to talk about it a little bit earlier in the week, the benefit of a veto. Is it just to send a message to government to say that we're unhappy with the way it's been played out, because similarly to what Patrick said, I filled out the survey and said yes to the increase in funding. I completely agree with it. I would like to understand more of the detail that is missing. But what's the point of the veto? That's my question. If, as I understand it, when the revised precept comes back, it could be a tiny little bit different and it's going to go through anyway. So is it just to send a message, and who do we send that message to, and how do we get that across?
So there is the impact of the veto and the reason for using the veto, which I would say fall into two different areas. I will hear from the PCC and his officers.
So from the point of view of the information, I will make 3 points. One point is we are probably one of the latest panels to meet. All the panels across the country have had the same information. I think there have only been 2 vetoes across the country, and you can look at those yourselves and decide whether they were correct or not. The fact that this piece of information that we need won't come out until possibly April, I think Judy said, is no different to previous years. We've had that before. How the panel used to deal with it was the chair used to write to us following this meeting, and there was a list of things they wanted clarified. And as soon as we had that information, we would plug it into the next meeting, which was appropriate. So hopefully that clarifies how that would work. Regarding the implications of the veto, I want to make it clear that all you will do, you won't send a message to government. If you want to send a message to government, and I was saving this for my summing up after the vote, but if you want to make a message to government, I'm going to ask you to write to support the position I'm in regarding the national funding formula. That would be a better way of sending the message to government. The only practical effect, if you vetoed it, is I would come back in 2 weeks' time with a budget which varies by, I think I'm allowed to vary it by a penny. And so all you will have done is taken a penny's worth of precept away from Dorset Police, and you know the need that we have. That would be the only practical effect. But it is your decision, it's not mine. So, but I just wanted to make those points.
So just clarifying that then. So essentially, you can support, you could choose not support, but then it would go to a separate vote as to, in not supporting, whether you determine you want to veto it. So you could not support it and still that veto would not necessarily go ahead.
Does that clarify the process for everyone present? Okay, I appreciate the clarity and comment there. I think we are ready to move to the vote on from members on supporting or opposing the precept as presented in the report. Okay, I will go first on this. This has been, and I think everyone has felt the difficulty of making this decision with the information that's been made available, the burden, the increased burden on our residents in terms of a full precept increase. I think the questions that have been asked of the budget report in this panel have been incisive and really targeting the key areas of concern. I have wavered between support and opposition. As with last year, the statements from the PCC, the Chief and the Chief Financial Officer have had a big bearing on the day on where I stand. I will vote to support this budget. I do look forward to regular updates, and I will also be looking at having a key line of inquiry around budget impacts for July, and on that basis, that I will support. So I will now go to the Vice Chair.
I'm going to say, for reasons outlined by the Chief Constable and the PCC, I've got a heavy heart in raising the precept for the taxpayers of Dorset, but I do support the budget. I know we need the money.
Councillor Canavan.
It's not a budget that I can support, Chair, because I just don't know the answers to a series of questions, and somehow or another, I have got to give confidence to the residents that I represent in one of the most deprived wards in BCP, that they actually going to see some benefit from this. And I can't justify that in my head. So very reluctantly, I have to oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. I think I made a position clearer last year, and that is pretty much still my position. I think that there's a lot of good work that the OPCC does and the Chief Constable's done. And I think that the budget itself looks good to me, but it's based on something I fundamentally disagree with. And I think the Police Crime Commissioner also does not think it's fair. So I'm going to not support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you very much, Chairman. No one likes putting up council tax. In regard to the budget itself, I feel the budget is a good budget. I do not believe it's the Police and Crime Commissioner's fault he has to put up the precept. That is the fault of this government for not properly funding the police. So therefore, I will be supporting him.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be supporting this budget for a couple of simple reasons, and against my natural instincts about the level of taxation that we're asking our local residents to pay. Had the Commissioner not worked so hard relentlessly to make this point to central government, and had the force as a whole not made such a compelling case for the implications of not taking the rise available to us, I would have been in a very different position today. But because both of those things have been made so clear today, I feel that we've got no other responsible option but to support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rampton.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one because I do feel there's a lack of information. However, I don't feel that is the Commissioner or the Chief Constable's fault. I think it's government's fault, and therefore I support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm minded to support the budget. However, I'm not happy to support the budget, and I think I agree with many of my fellow members that I feel that this money should come from central government, and they should support our forces the way they should, or the way they have been supporting the northern forces. And I would like to think that we can support the Police Crime Commissioner in basically stating to the government that what we've done, but we're not happy with what we've done, and it's they that should be supporting our police forces.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. Councillor Sidway.
Yeah, I support it. I don't think I've really wavered much, largely because we have a process where if we waver, then the PCC gets to do it anyway. So I don't see the point in it. That's why I asked the question of what is the point of saying no. I do think that it is money that should be coming from central government. It's not just the current government, I would add. This is not something that the PCC has been asking for the last 18 months or so.
Thank you, Councillor Sidaway, and thank you, members. I believe that is voting from all members in. That gives us supporting the budget 7 votes. In opposition to the budget is carried for 26-27. And thank you everybody for your due diligence in this process. It's not easy. Would you like to make a comment, Commissioner?
I would like to make a comment. Firstly, thank you. Thank you on behalf of not just Dorset Police, but also the people of Dorset. Because that's what this is about. This is about a budget which has a fundamental purpose in order to keep people safe. I struggle with the idea that you wouldn't have supported it, but I'm not going to go there. I think I will do 2 things though. I'm going to give you the commitment from me that we will continue to make every penny count. You've heard the processes that we've got in place: Operation Evolve, priority-based budgeting, performance reviews, but also the focus. And that's what's achieving us the results as well as the good fiscal management. It is beyond belief, right? Beyond belief. That if you do the right thing, you are fiscally good at managing your budget. You deliver, and we are delivering, that you still not get the response you need from central government. And you are right, Councillor Sidaway. This is not just this government. But the fundamental difference now is that the issues that we have in Dorset, the seasonality, the rurality, that argument was won. The national funding formula was recalculated. What didn't happen was it wasn't consulted on and it wasn't enacted. And that needs to happen. It isn't about trying to do a new one, which again would service the metropolitan areas. It's about using the one which is on the shelf in the Home Office and actually doing it right and having the courage to do that. Because I guarantee that those 7 forces who always make a profit out of the national funding formula, and I've been in the room with some of them, they will fight tooth and nail to keep their position. Now that needs to happen. Now you will recall that last year under this new government, as soon as it came in, I made the point. I wrote to the then Home Secretary. I never got a response to that letter. When there was the regime change at the end of last summer, I wrote to the policing minister. I did get a response to that, but it was the usual fob off about how much money is going into policing generally. I then tried to do something extremely difficult, to get a collective endeavour amongst the MPs for Dorset. And we got that. One wanted to put in a personal letter rather than sign the joint letter, but all 8 MPs wrote with me to the Home Secretary to ask for a meeting to discuss this, to ask about the national funding formula, or if not, what else are they going to do in order to help us with our seasonal pressures? To date, this was November, I have not had a word back. That is disgusting and reprehensible. It's an insult, not just to me, but all the MPs in Dorset, and ultimately to the people of Dorset. And that is why I am now so stringent. I will never give up about this funding formula, because that is the fundamental strategic deficit in our budget, which we can't change. So what happens next? As a panel, I would like you to unanimously support that position and write in support of that letter to the Home Secretary. What I will also do is I will investigate the potential for a judicial review. Lincolnshire started that. I've already started discussions with them because I am fed up, right? Fed up with sitting here every year asking the people of Dorset to pay for their police force when they already pay percentage-wise the fourth largest amount of any police force in the country. When other forces, other areas, their people only have to pay 20%. The average was 34% last time I looked. We are at 52. That injustice is not right. So the other thing I'm also doing is I'm involving other partners. Last summer, I was at the Dorset show and I went to see the National Farmers Union on their stand. It's something I do every year. But coincidentally, the chairman of the NFU was there. And he gave me the courtesy of half an hour where I took him through the way that police funding doesn't work. The 10 worst funded forces in the country are rural forces. And now the NFU are now working with us to make that point. So I will never rest on this as long as I am Police and Crime Commissioner and I have the ability to try and make a difference. And the third point I'll make is you heard it from the chief. Despite this awful funding, because of the focus of the Police and Crime Plan, because it fits with the priorities of the people, and because the fourth vision is aligned with it, we are delivering. That will continue. So thank you for the time and thank you for the opportunity to make those points.
Thank you for the statement, Commissioner. So we have been at this point of discussion several times before about the vagaries of the national funding formula and the disproportionate amount of precept that the people of Dorset are required to pay. So we know that the proportion of police budget is funded by 52.6% is funded from the residents of Dorset via precept. I believe the national average is closer to 25%. So it does feel that we are paying a disproportionately high amount of that as residents. A theme across the time I have sat on this panel has been how do we get a fair deal for Dorset on funding, and how do we engage joint endeavour to take steps towards that? And I do feel that progress has been made here, in particular with the joint endeavour of the 8 MPs across political lines to the Home Office to ask these questions. I'd also note that in a previous panel, we have had a vote on whether we as a panel would write a letter of support for the PCC's lobbying efforts on this, and that vote was carried. However, the membership of the panel has changed, and I would like to take the call for the panel to support the PCC's lobbying efforts in this regard, as stated in his comment, and I will shortly ask you to raise your hands if you support again. I think that's probably all I have to say. So, barring any additional comments, panel, I would like you to, Councillor Canavan.
Well, obviously you're free to write whatever letter you want, but I'm not going to put my name to it because I believe it's politically motivated. So let me just spell out some realistic and the reality of the political situation that we face. I have always supported the Commissioner in his bid to change the national funding formula as it is currently set. However, the reality is, in my view, that that national funding formula is not going to change in advance of the reorganisation of policing. That's been set out in the white paper. The other thing is we will not have a police and crime commissioner in Dorset after 2028. So if you think you can change the government policy between now and then, I think that would be naive. So you write whatever you want, and I will continue till there'll be my own MP to get him to continue his efforts to do something to support Dorset. But the reality, in my view, Chair, is that it's not going to change anything. And I just think you have to be aware that that's the situation that we face.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan, for your comment. I would just like to make a comment of mine briefly before I move to others in the room. In my view, this is in no way, shape or form politically motivated. We are motivated by a collective desire to get a fair deal for the residents of Dorset on police funding. That, I believe, we can check our political colours in at the door on that one. Ultimately, our purpose is to get the best possible outcomes for our residents. I believe we can, by the weight of our numbers, raise our voices and get change. It's on that basis that I entered politics and am a councillor. And I will not stop in the pursuit of raising our collective voices to get that deal. I have a raised hand from Councillor O'Leary.
Yes, thank you very much. In response to Councillor Canavan, I wrote in and spoke in this chamber around the poor funding formula under the previous administration, of which I'm a member of that party. And that's in regards to local government. It's not just in police in terms of underfunded, it is in terms of general local government, and so are rural councils compared to in the city councils especially. I would urge them to sign the letter, and it will show united front. I'm not convinced based on this government's track record, that a lot of these changes to local government and policing may end up being carried out anyway if the U-turns carry on. So therefore, I would also urge that even if it is changed, we should still fight now to make sure that under the new model, we aren't also then underfunded anyway. I just don't see what harm it can do. It can only surely do good. And I think it's a shame that the member will not put his name to that letter, even despite the fact it will criticise the government of which he is a member of the leading party of. I did it. I know other Conservatives have done it when we were in government. It shouldn't be that way inclined. And like I say, if we don't fight now, when we do change to a new model, we will be at risk of being underfunded in that as well, if we don't put up a fight now.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Leary. I will take one more comment if it's coming forwards, as Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really do feel it's important that we get cross-party consensus on this. I must admit, as a panel member, I thought we'd already given support to a letter that had already gone. So frankly, anything to make sure that that goes ASAP is important. But just to dwell ever so slightly on the need for cross-party support here, Dorset at Westminster and in our two unitary councils has rarely, if ever, been as politically diverse as it is today. And yet we are, as I understand it, on the principle of police funding, agreed. We need more funding into Dorset from central government, not off the back of local taxation. This ought to be one of those moments where we enjoy agreeing with each other on and trying to find ways not to support a mutual letter on the basis of it being seen as political. It seems odd to me. So I really feel it's quite important that we do that. And if needs be, I would be quite pleased, if required, that it goes to a recorded vote.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Gibson. Okay, so we will move to the member vote on the generation of a letter from this panel supporting, to be drafted and reviewed, supporting the lobbying efforts to get a fair deal for Dorset on police funding. I know that Councillor Gibson has asked for a recorded vote, so before we go any further, can I see a show of hands for support for a recorded vote? Okay, I'd say that's carried. That was not unanimous. Is it a requirement for it to be unanimous?
Sharon, could you just bear with me, please, while I check the numbers unless Sue knows the numbers? I'll check the rules. Sorry, please bear with me.
Thank you for the clarity. We have consulted with the monitoring officer who's present, and the advice is that we go for the majority, which is to have a recorded vote on this subject. So the vote is for whether the panel support the drafting of a letter of support for the PCC's Home Office lobbying to get a fairer deal for the funding for Dorset Police in its most simple terms. I will ask.
Sorry, just a note on clarity. What the letters talked about was it talked about the funding formula, but it also talked about how you can also help us. Because if we can't get the funding formula, I want something else. I want something which helps us get around this seasonality problem, which causes us to bend out of shape every year. So I think you've got to, I think you need both bits.
So we would be drafting a letter of support of your lobbying activities. I would expect us to draft and review that prior to it being submitted, in effect. Okay, on that basis, can I see a show of hands from members in support of the panel? As it is a recorded vote, I will ask panel members one by one to indicate their support for the letter of support. I will start. I am in support of writing the letter of joint endeavour. I'll go to my vice.
Also strongly in support.
Sorry, Councillor Canavan.
I'm not going to support anything until I've seen it. I'm prepared to consider it if I see it, but no more than that. So I'm not supporting a letter, or I'm giving on a blank basis.
Okay, I have you for oppose in this instance. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. I support.
So Leary.
For, Chairman.
Councillor Gibson.
Support.
Councillor Rampton. Pardon.
I support. I think we should go further. I think we should be raising public awareness. We should have demonstrations. We should be marching in the streets. We should do everything, press every lever we have.
I will note that as support. Thank you. Councillor Flagg. Thank you, Councillor Flagg. Councillor Sidaway.
I strongly support it.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe that is all member votes here present. I record that as 8 votes in support and 1 vote in opposition. So that is carried. In terms of drafting the letter of support, I think it would be useful to have volunteers from the panel to put themselves forward to do this as an informal working group with the resulting letter to be distributed to the panel for further approval. Could I get an indication from panel members who would be willing to collaborate in the production of this letter of support from the panel? Okay, so for the record, that's councillors Keddy, Gibson and Wood.
If it helps, because we've got all the letters going backwards on this issue, we could help draft it for you to send an initial draft across, if that's any good.
I'm happy to receive the previous letters that have been submitted. I don't think it would be necessarily appropriate for the PCC or the officers to draft it on our behalf. I think it must be generated by the panel, but I do appreciate the supporting information. Okay, so I think we can move on. So we have covered a few more areas than I anticipated. The next major item is the quarterly monitoring report. I think I can read your mind on your next request, Councillor Rampton, and I am going to suggest a 10-minute comfort break. And I would, before we do that, I would like to pass to the Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. Just conscious I will probably take that opportunity to leave today's meeting. But I did want to say personally a thank you for the huge amount of time that you have given this morning and the way that you have listened to the case that I and the Police and Crime Commissioner have outlined, and your careful consideration and insightful questions. I know that supporting this budget has not been an easy decision for individual members. And of course, I won't go into the broader issues, but I am fully aware of what those broader issues are. But actually, your support for this budget today doesn't just do the things that I've outlined in that speech. It does give hope to the officers, staff and volunteers who I talked about, who are putting their heart and soul into providing the public service, even within the constraints and challenges they've got. And your support of the budget today just demonstrates to them the ongoing commitment from you and the support you have for your officers and staff and volunteers in what they do every day to keep Dorset safe for everyone. So I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I think I can speak for the panel in offering our very sincere commendation for your work, your passion for delivering for the people of Dorset, and also the difficult overall environment that you're having to operate in at the moment. Well, we are deeply grateful for your work. I will now move to a 10-minute comfort break, reconvening to review the quarterly monitoring report. Thank you, members. Welcome back, members. Thank you for your contribution to the previous items. We will now be moving on to item 7, which is the review of the quarterly the Q3 monitoring report. So we will receive an update of progress from the PCC against the police and crime plan to enable the panel to scrutinise activity and assess the achievement of outcomes. So I will pass to the PCC to make a statement on the Q3 monitoring report, and then we will go to questions from the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I've done in the past, I'll go through all priorities and we'll do all the questions at the end. I think that seems to work extremely well. So first of all, the first priority, to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. This is the priority which deals with some of the significant issues that the residents of Dorset worry about. So let's just go through here. Total crime was down again. Total police recorded ASB incidents were down again. This continues to be a good move forward. If I go into some of the things which happened during this quarter, members will know that I have been somewhat passionate about the issue of e-scooters and e-bikes on our road, about the fact that legislation needs to catch up with them. And if there isn't legislation, then we need to do everything we can in order that they're not used where they shouldn't be and in ways they shouldn't be. So I was really pleased that Dorset Police have gradually increased the number that they are seizing. I'm also pleased that I've had the support of at least one, maybe two Member of Parliaments very vocally about this. 99 legal e-bikes, 120 e-scooters were seized by Dorset Police. That's the highest level of seizures ever. I'd like that to continue. I'm also asking the force to do more on the communication side. And if the force could communicate more about the issue of e-scooters from a prevention point of view, then that would be brilliant. So we will keep pushing on that. Dorset Police also commenced their Winter of Action campaign in December, where they were very clear and very public about focusing on retail crime, antisocial behaviour and violence against women and girls. When it came to road safety, I basically made certain that we had noise about the issue of drug driving, particularly from a victim perspective. We have had some fatalities in Dorset, but we've also had some people who have had their lives changed just by having a crash with somebody who's been drug driving. And we know from the national figures, this is now more than drink driving. And I think we need to give more emphasis to it. And I am working hard in order to do that with my national portfolio. From a point of view of burglary and acquisitive crime, you may remember that about a year ago, we were worried about an increase in uptick of theft from motor vehicles. I'm pleased that there's been a significant year-on-year reduction now in the theft of motor vehicles. And also we are getting better. Dorset Police is improving on their positive outcomes for home burglaries. And this again comes to the point around information. If there's a string of burglaries, the more information the police have got about it, the more likely they are in order to be able to get the positive outcome we want. Regarding business and retail crime, this was a culmination of, I guess, a 5-year push through the Dorset Safer Business Partnership, which has got the police much closer to the retail sector. And now we have a digital crime pack, which has improved the way that the reporting happens. Before, it was very clunky, it was very analog, it required the use of deliveries of the crime pack and then picking up the crime pack, and there was a huge capacity for it to be seen as too difficult, too much, and therefore the report's not happening. So that is good. And we've also got the digital NICE Investigate, which allows retail sector to actually link their cameras with Dorset Police. So it makes it easier in order to get the individuals involved. I also supported Safer Business Week of Action. Going on to a second priority, make policing more visible and connected. Well, this to me is the, I've said it before, the oil tanker. It's the hardest one to address. We needed to prioritize, as you heard earlier, emergency calls. We're now very good around 999 from the point of view of 92.3% answered within 10 seconds. We know that our triage answer time for 101, so this is the 70 to 75% of the calls that go into 101, are answered and dealt with in 1.35 minutes. The more difficult calls, this is the secondary handling answer time, is the one that we've discussed frequently at this panel. And that is now beginning to come down. This is a 10-minute reduction from where it was previously. Now, you heard earlier, I'd like to go faster, but there are constraints for me being able to do that. It's also got in this report, it's got the data around the community contact points and mobile police station deployments. I'm very clear that the mobile police station has to work and work the way that we want it to. I will be getting a review with the force into me happening in the next quarter. I launched my annual survey across September and October. This is to check that the police and crime plan is still where it needs to be. And I can report that it is. And it is still the same crimes which affect people in their locality and which they want to be dealt with. I also issued the precept survey. I could talk for a long time about the precept survey, but I think we've probably done that. I've talked about improvements to call handling. The other point is call abandonment. So how long is it before somebody hangs up? How many people hang up? There's now much more granularity around this in the contact center, and we're putting in place to track what happens with those abandoned calls. It's all very well to drop off the 101, but do you actually go on the single online home, the website, which is where you've been directed to? We want to know that, and there's a new project in order to address that. Moving on to the fight violent crime and high harm. We've plateaued the most serious violence with this quarter, but domestic abuse is down, and the force feels that's a real reduction. So I'm quite pleased about that. Violence against the person is down generally, so we're seeing the same pattern continue, which we talked about earlier. During this quarter, we led the recommissioning of the high-risk independent domestic advisor service. We've now had bids from 4 prospective providers for the new service, and an award offer has been made. So I am certain we'll come back and talk about that at a future panel. I'd also like to make the point that we celebrate the results of the latest round of Operation Scorpion. This is the, I guess, the benchmark for PCC collaboration and force collaboration, in that it is the 5 forces of the Southwest coming together in order to make a difference around the issue of illegal drugs in our society. And once again, we had a significant number of arrests, warrants executed, 5 drug lines permanently closed, weapons and drugs seized, but also critically, vulnerable people safeguarded. The other thing also, which I believe happened during this quarter, was we also looked at the Forget the Ket, which has been launched, which is an awareness campaign for users of ketamine to make them aware of the risks and the harms. That's through the Combating Drugs Partnership in association with the local authorities and public health. The violence reduction, as you know, we didn't get any money for a violence reduction unit. That still goes to 22 forces only. But what we have done is we've put in place some of the elements of that, such as the focused deterrent program, which is a range of partnership interventions with those young people who are most at high risk. And we also launched here the Emergency Department Youth Workers Initiative. And I went to the emergency department at Poole Hospital in order to see how that was progressing. There's a couple of other things there. This is about funding to make certain we have training for the officers. In one situation around sexual exploitation, the other one was partnering with a charity, Karma Nirvana, in order to train officers on the identification of honor-based abuse. When I move on to rural crime, again, we are now beginning to see the paying off of the collaboration between the forces in the Southwest, in that the other thing, which also I think sometimes gets forgotten, is we've managed to get the Regional Organised Crime Unit to look at rural crime as well. And together, they were able to address an issue which has been the plague of North Dorset, particularly Northwest Dorset, and we were able to recover property and make arrests. It also mentions the NFU and fair funding. I'm working with Hampshire to put together a cross-border working group to make certain that our border working is as good as possible, particularly in relating to wildlife crime. And so we'll be talking to landowners and farmers just to check where we are with that. Regarding fly tipping, the Assistant Enforcement Officer continues to play his role and continues to issue fines, seize vehicles in a way that didn't happen before his existence. So I will continue to support that. WhatsApp guidance has now been drafted to promote to farmers on sharing information. And the force has also looked at his crime reporting for rural crime, which I'm really pleased they've started to do. And something which doesn't get the noise that it should is the issue of heritage crime. So this varies everything from the stealing of lead off of church roofs to the vandalization of hill forts. We've got quite a few of those in Dorset. And also offshore, the poaching from wrecks, I think the best phrase of putting it. So I'm really pleased that now we've got 80 members signed up to a Dorset Heritage Watch scheme. When we come to the put victims and communities first, I'm pleased to say we've got victim satisfaction up a bit more. We've got numbers of victims being supported more, going in the right direction. The percentage of people feeling safe in Dorset has also risen. The Chief alluded to it, but I've also helped fund a new victims champion in the force to make certain that the force really does look at it from the victim's point of view and make certain that occurs. We also had during this time the work of Operation Sceptre, a partnership event and educational input for groups of young people operating in schools. And so this is talking about targeting knife crime education. And no matter how you cut it, over the last 2 or 3 years, something's working. If you remember, I equipped the force with knife arches and knife wands. We've made a deal that we are going to be strong on this. Stop and search is being used in order to look for knives. But probably more importantly, the education of our young people has progressed apace. So I'm very pleased that we are the second lowest for knife offences in the UK now. I think I'll leave it there on that one. Do you know what? I wasn't going to say an awful lot about number 6, because I think we probably have discussed a lot of the elements in number 6, if the panel's okay with that. The one I did want to pick up on, though, is the last one. The PCC has agreed to fund a pilot for a wellbeing project based in Dorset aimed at officers and staff who regularly deal with trauma. You will have remembered from the wellbeing paper how the demand on our officers really is beginning to cause issues. And so we basically have a pilot which we're rolling out in collaboration with not just the force, but the Federation in unison as well. And I think I'm going to hold it there and go to questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That is good timing. We have 5 minutes before we hit the 3-hour mark. Could I get a quick show of hands from members to indicate if you are happy to extend the meeting over the 3 hours? Okay, that's unanimous, fantastic. Okay, in which case we will continue directly to questions from members on the quarterly monitoring report. We will start with Councillor Wood, who has a question on priority 1, cut crime and antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, thank you. This question about the killed or seriously injured figures are down as to be determined. Why is that?
It's a simple answer. The paper deadline for this meeting was closer to the end of the quarter than is typically the case, meaning that KSI data was not available at the time of submission of the paper. I can now confirm that the KSI figure for quarter 3 is 79, which compares to 98 in the previous quarter. I ought to stress, though, that these numbers, again, because of the tighter deadlines, remain unverified. That is to say, the severity of injuries can change, and indeed that some injuries are only reported some time after the event. But that's the best figures that I've now got. Does that answer the question for you? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Rampton under Fight Violent Crime. We have 2 questions from Councillor Rampton under Fight Violent Crime and High Harm.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and be brief. I think the first one is really more of a statement rather than a question. It's about the honour-based abuse. Firstly, I wonder when agencies are going to stop using the term honour-based, because there's no honour in the crimes committed by people, usually on women and girls. And also, why has it changed from violence to abuse? It always used to be called honour-based violence, and now it seems to be abuse. Is there a rationale for that? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I totally agree with you regarding the term honour in this context. However, it's a nationally recognised term that relates to a form of domestic abuse motivated by the abuser's perception that a person has brought or may bring dishonour or shame to themselves, their family or the community. So I can't go against the way that the government calls it, the way that the Home Office calls it, and the way that everybody does it. But I absolutely accept your comment. There is no honour. No honour in abusing people in your family because you think they brought shame on your family. It can take many forms. It can be complex to identify, but it centres the idea of controlling individuals, making other people behave in certain ways or subscribe to certain beliefs. Where the problem lies is that for some people, the concept of this so-called honour is prized above the safety and well-being of the individuals. So they see it through one prism, that it is to bring dishonour and shame, which can have severe consequences. So it's used to justify wrongly many types of abuse and even disownment of physical harm. Like domestic abuse, which was once more frequently referred to as domestic violence, the terms honour-based violence and honour-based abuse are often used interchangeably. However, as abuse can take place without physical violence, Carmen Nirvana, who's the charity who we're working with, they are the first specialist charity established to help victims affected by these crimes, and they use the term honour-based abuse. My view going forward is that's the term that we should use, because a bit like domestic abuse also takes into account coercion and control, so should this. So it takes into account both violence and abuse. So that's my view on where it is. But I agree with your point about the there is no honour in this.
Thank you. I have to disagree. I think it should be violence and abuse, violence or abuse. Anyway, Operation Scorpion was my second question. It's had good results, but what's the ongoing oversight? You know, you're saying about the drugs drug lines being closed permanently, but is it like a bit of a hydra? You know, you cut off the heads and then some more spring up. And what's the sort of monitoring and oversight of the successes of Operation Scorpion? And sort of supplementary question, really. You talk about vulnerable people and how they've been safeguarded and protected. What's the ongoing oversight of those people to ensure they remain safeguarded? Thank you.
So you asked me if it was a hydra and you cut off one head, does another one come up? Yes, of course, that's the way it is. The war of drugs is won every day, but it's a forever war. As long as there are substances which humans wish to abuse, then it will occur. And whilst we know that we've been effective with Scorpion, this is through our monitoring. We have a quarterly Southwest collaboration where we have the Southwest Regional Organised Crime Unit come and present their data and their results. We know that we've changed the way that the serious organised crime groups are operating. We've forced them to do less into our area movements, but they are now unfortunately using other methodology. The channels of communication around drugs has changed. It used to be you had to know a drug dealer on a corner. Now you can get an app for your mobile phone. And so we know that there's less overall county line in the old days, like it was when you were transiting kids on trains across. There's less of that. There is more local exploitation of children. So we do know we've had an effect, and we just got to keep doing it and keep moving as they move. And we'll keep monitoring it through the Southwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, through the Combating Drugs Partnership, which gets a report every quarter, specifically on Scorpion and Viper, in order to make that difference. But you raised a really important point, which doesn't get talked about very much, which is the vulnerability of those people once you've done your Scorpion or your Viper or whatever. So Dorset Police puts victims first and delivers bespoke vulnerability training to officers and staff. So the officers are all trained on how to spot the vulnerability. They're supported by the attending officers and staff. They immediately get safeguarding advice. And in certain cases, and I've been there when this happens, I've been on warrants, police powers of protection can be used to remove a child to a place of safety to prevent significant harm, for example. Furthermore, referrals are also made to local and national agencies to ensure enduring safeguarding is put in place. So Dorset Police remain committed to sharing multi-agency information to safeguard vulnerable members, and indeed much planning with local agencies talks about this. So there would be referrals, for example, to We Are With You, REACH, those organisations working in order to help people with drug-related issues. Because Operation Scorpion operates regionally, but it's delivered locally by neighbourhood policing teams, they also continue to conduct patrols and checks on vulnerable victims who are susceptible to crime. So if intelligence comes up, the classic would be cuckooing. Then they would, and I've seen this operate, they have a list of vulnerable people they think in the community, and they will continue to call on them to check they are not being cuckooed or exploited, etc. So officers complete these cuckooing checks. These are raised by the Chief Inspector Lead for Actioning via the neighbourhood policing teams, or the most appropriate person if there's an immediate threat, risk or harm issue. So if intelligence comes in that somebody's being cuckooed, that would basically be given a priority. These are tracked through Viper to ensure compliance. Safeguarding is conducted at the address where necessary. Intelligence is submitted and relevant partner referrals made. They also work, I alluded to this earlier, they work with charities where they refer vulnerable adults, and that can happen with things like alcohol and drug treatment and indeed rehousing. In the last Scorpion week, a total of, I think it's 36 vulnerable adults and children were visited and safeguarded. So that's how it gets picked up. But there's also other things that go on. Operation Towery happened during last Scorpion. This was a prevent initiative around the criminal use of taxis, we educated the taxi drivers around the signs of exploitation with children using taxis for county lines. And the neighbourhood policing team spoke with over 30 drivers that week as part of trying to prevent and spotting those vulnerable individuals. They did the same thing with Operation Make Safe, which was test purchases in local hotels. So basically, they used individuals, they pretended to be exploited. They wanted to see if hoteliers were able to spot the signs of exploitation around children. This meant that there were learning opportunities identified with a number of hotels which would benefit from further training and safeguarding. And the chief inspector picked that up and made certain that was delivered. The last one, which is an interesting one, is Operation Pester. This was also utilised. It sends public health messaging to users known to use county lines phones. So once a phone has been taken off the dealer, then Operation Pester will come in to send health messages to those individuals who are taking the drugs. This is part of a wider approach to tackle county lines, and it includes wider preventative messaging. And finally, officers worked with a local charity, Escape Line, which I supported and brought into Dorset, focusing on education in local schools, communities and businesses to identify the signs of county lines and drug use, and also to give advice on how to get out of it. So there has been a wide-ranging number of interventions for various types of vulnerabilities linked to Scorpion and Viper.
Thank you for the response. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hampton?
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, we will now move on to a question raised by Councillor Flagg regarding fighting rural crime.
Thank you, Chair. I think you already touched on this, David, with your presentation, but the rural crime team recently posted on social media that they'd worked collaboratively with our neighbouring forces, and I wondered if you'd be able to provide the panel with the outcomes of those operations and what the future looks like with regards to the way forward.
Thank you, David. Well, I have got the outcome of some of the operations. Obviously, this is I'm not an operational person. It's not within my remit, but I have got the information from the police. I think we're getting to a really good place now with the rural crime team and where we've got to. We've come a long way from when there was only one or two people largely trying to do prevention work in Dorset, to now something which can actually affect these serious organised crime groups which are operating in the rural environment. This is because, well, I put it as a priority within the police and crime plan, but I've also made efforts to link up with the other PCCs in the Southwest, and indeed with Hampshire, as I mentioned earlier, in order that we can address it across the borders. And we've now taken it a stage further. We've started something which again is beginning to pay dividends, called Operation Ragwort. That is where the five forces, a bit like Scorpion, come together in the Southwest. We share intelligence. We make certain that we go after the crooks. And you would have seen in that report that I mentioned the fact that we had addressed the issue in Northwest Dorset. Well, that was because of collaboration between Avon and Somerset, Dorset Police and the Regional Organised Crime Unit in order to bring that together. That wouldn't have happened without the work that's been done in order to align us more closely. So the superintendents responsible for rural crime matters meet regularly with their regional counterparts to work together on specific operations. We will be hosting an Operation Ragwort event later this month, for which planning is well underway. And I've expressed a view that I want to see, for want of a better word, I want to see some real effect on some of the individuals causing acquisitive crime in our county. We'll see where we get to. It depends on intelligence. The goal here is to apply the same rigor and scrutiny to rural crime at a regional level as we do with the drugs through Operation Scorpion. And the other goal is to make certain that the Regional Organised Crime Unit also pays the same attention to organised crime in the rural communities. To that end, from April, Dorset Police will take the regional lead for rural crime for the following 12 months, provide a coordination and leadership role and continue to raise the profile of rural crime matters. And in terms of benefit, yes, we have been successful. So I've talked about the series of farm thefts in West and North Dorset. Well, actually, several arrests attempts were made in Somerset and Gwent against known OCG members. 6 people were arrested for conspiracy to steal and 3 trailers were recovered. And there would have been a lot of intelligence which came out of that. So yes, it is having an effect. There was going to be a large hair coursing event taking place in East Dorset. But what happened was, with the help of the National Farmers Union, the Countryside Alliance, we were able to get a lot of noise out there that we knew that this was going to happen. And so with our partners in Wiltshire and Hampshire, we were able to basically throw that off course. There is something called Operation Galileo, which has been running for some time. And Karen Rampton is asking me to sum up a bit. So I will do my best. But Operation Galileo is important because that's about hair coursing. That's where Wiltshire and Hampshire come together. There was also a burglary in North Dorset of several peregrine falcons. That was sorted. They quickly identified a suspect. They worked with both national and international partners. So this is the rural crime team. And a suspect was arrested. Performance statistics are not easily captured for rural crime matters. But I'm pleased to report that what we can tell, the volumes of reported rural crime show a sustained downwards trend from 204 in 2022-3 to 132 crimes in the first 3 quarters, 158 last year. Obviously, that's what Dorset Police knows. So the comment about reporting equally holds true in the rural crime area.
Could you sum up? We've got quite a weighty question to follow this one.
I just finished.
That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the last question that I have is from Councillor Canavan. And I have been looking forward to this one because it sets the context in the wider things that are going on in the space at the moment. So over to you, Patrick.
The risk appendix to the budget report recognises risks relating to the recently issued white paper. What transitional work are the PCC and Force going to do in advance of the bill becoming legislation? What impact does the PCC believe that this transitioning will have on efficiency projects proposed or already underway?
As members will know, the long-promised white paper was published very recently. It proposes a number of reforms. It proposes the creation of a national police service, bringing together existing national bodies, including the College of Policing, the National Crime Agency, and counter-terrorism policing into a single organisation. It has an independent review of police structures due to report recommendations in summer 2026. And that's been trailed that it will lead to a reduction in number of forces by the end of the next Parliament, 2034. Greater centralisation of power, including powers for the Home Secretary to dismiss chief constables, greater centralisation and oversight of local performance measures, and of course, the abolition of PCCs and of police and crime panels by 2028, being replaced by a mayoral system or a local authority-led police and crime board. Members will note that although the white paper is far-reaching, it's a statement of intent, rather than a draft bill, which will follow later. Members will also note that the cited timescales for the proposed reforms are quite far away. As a result, I can confirm for members and for the public listening to this meeting online that I'm very clear that I have a job to do. This will not alter right up to the point whereby primary legislation is enacted that brings about a change. As that change looks like it's going to be 2034, I am not going to, without more detail, refocus part of my office on transition until I see what it looks like. We need to remain focused. The force needs to remain focused on the delivery of the police and crime plan. In terms of transitional work, however, there are a number of national work streams. My office and I remain closely engaged in that. For example, the Home Office Police Efficiencies and Collaboration Programme is a pre-existing programme that already was considering potential opportunities to unlock police efficiencies through shared services at a national scale. With the publication of the white paper, this programme has strengthened its focus around delivering the initial iteration of the new National Centre of Policing, which will consist of 4 initial capabilities covering existing national IT, commercial, air service, and forensic capabilities. We will engage, myself and my office, with these national transition programs in the first instance and endeavour to develop local programs as and when the detail of what is required is made available. And finally, in terms of the impact of this change on existing efficiency projects, the reality is that Dorset Police already works collaboratively at local, regional and national levels. And undoubtedly, there will continue to be further opportunities for improvement identified at all levels, which need management in advance of national changes. Simply put, we cannot afford to stand still waiting for national reform programs to have an impact, and nor would the people who live, work and visit Dorset expect us to either. Chair, at the risk of putting upon your patience, I could make a few words about what I thought about reform, or would you rather I held that until we had more detail?
I would be interested to hear the PCC's general opinion of the reforms. I think it would be quite useful for the panel. Would the panel agree? Okay, we'll go from the nods. Councillor Rampton.
Chair, I'm just conscious of the parking restrictions, and would you like me to pop out and put some time on the car?
I would very much like to hear yes, Chair. Yes, Commissioner, I would like to hear your views on white paper reform.
So there's no doubt that policing needs reform. There's certain aspects of it which there's been discussion about for ages. There is something about economies of scale. So the idea that national IT, the idea that commercial, the idea that forensics, all of those, there is a good rationale for putting that together. And the idea of the national centre makes perfect sense. That has been discussed with PCCs. We've had input into that and the way that is going. I should make the point there is already something called Blue Light Commercial, which has for a number of years had the mandate in order to do this and has found £300 million worth of savings, is my understanding. And we work within that framework as Dorset Police. My concern about this is there's got to be a local view of certainly at least one of them. They talk about the air service, the National Police Air Service. At the moment, the National Police Air Service doesn't work effectively, in our view, in the Southwest. We are not getting the value we need out of it. My concern, if that goes into a national box, is that we still won't get any value out of it. So that's where I am on that. The FBI, that's been mooted. It's been mooted before on a number of occasions. The NCA, I thought were meant to be the FBI, but this looks like it's going to go bigger. My concern there is I can see the rationale. It would be good if there was overlap removed between some of these organizations. But again, the devil is going to be in the detail. I'm concerned about two things. One, governance is critical. At the moment, there is no local understanding, no local governance. No, we don't understand what the NCA does. Where does that fit in? Where does the people get to see what the NCA does? If this gets bigger, then what will happen? At the moment, the ROCU, I have fought hard for Dorset across the last 5 years to get more emphasis from the ROCU about two things, about Dorset generally, but also about rural affairs. Both of those have come to fruition. But if that local voice is removed, and it's only top-down tasking for the ROCU, then we've got a problem. Mergers. Okay, large forces. Well, the first thing I'll say about this, and I appreciate you don't want me to go on for longer than 15 minutes, but bigger isn't better. If you look at the safest forces, and indeed some of the most cost-effective forces, they are some of the smallest forces. Policing also, if it comes from the top down and looked at only from an urban-centric perspective, you will have talks about things like serious violence. You have talk about all those things which need to be sorted, yes. But before I got here as PCC, ASB wasn't a priority for the force. Rural wasn't a priority for the force. Shoplifting lasted as long as an election cycle. Drugs. I'm not talking about violence from drugs, that's different. I'm talking about actually countering the issue of illegal drugs in our society. All that, I believe, will be deprioritized. And I believe that what will happen is that we will have a focus on the cities and not a focus on everybody. And then I'm really, really worried about the centralization of power. If performance targets, if hiring and firing chief constables, if everything is dictated from the centre, and there's only a small number of people that's being dictated to, then surely what we've moved to is politicisation of the police. Because it's about fulfilling government targets and not what the needs of the local people need. And my last point is this. Remember what Robert Peel set up in the first place. And the last point he makes, the one that is meant to be the one thing that the police is there for, to recognise always that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder and not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with them. Too many chief constables, and I'm not talking about our chief constable, too many chief constables talk about they want to be world-class in operational policing. They talk about the tools they need to do the thing. But actually, it is delivering on the ground for the people locally, which matters. And I really, really think this is a step towards removing that from the people. So that's my take on it. We'll see how it develops. But the most important thing is whatever the local governance looks like, it's got to be robust. It's got to be able to do the job. PCCs have been doing that. What comes next has to do that. And forgive me, if you have a Southwest force, it won't be a Dorset committee which oversees it. This is intensely worrying. I think it's ill-conceived and it's gone too far.
Thank you for the question and the response. That does bring us to the end of our questions of the Q4 monitoring report. I'm glad we've been able to take in some commentary on the white paper and the police reforms. We can now move on to item 8, which is a complaints update, and I'll pass over to Mark for that.
Thank you, Chair. So at the last meeting, it was reported that there was one complaint remaining outstanding. That's now been investigated. The complainant was advised of the outcome and it was not upheld. The complainants appealed that decision, and at that stage, our complaints protocol requires the stand-up of the complaints subcommittee, and that's going to meet following this meeting with 3 councillors sitting, which are Councillors Canavan, Bowen and Wood. This will include consideration as to whether the complaints protocol itself remains fit for purpose based on any lessons that have been learned from that complaint. Any proposal then to make changes to the protocol will come back to the next panel meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update, Mark. That's good. So, do we have any questions around the complaints update? Then we will move on to item 9, which is the forward work plan. So I would like members to note the forward work plan. We have papers that have been suggested for the July panel. Previous suggestions have been hate crimes and hate incidents, led by Councillors Sidaway and Canavan. Out of court disposals and rise, suggested by myself. I have there are a couple of other proposals that have come out of this panel and in the work that we've done around the budget. I would like to propose that we have heard a lot of reference to Dorset Police's Operation Evolve and the transformation project and how that seeks efficiencies both by priority-based budgets and other measure and performance reviews. I think it would be good for us and the people of Dorset to get a deeper understanding of the Evolve transformation programme, and I would like to propose that we put that on the forward work plan. Do members agree that Evolve will make a good subject for a deep dive? I'm going to take that as consensus with broad nods. Also, we have discussed at length the budget report and the need for further scrutiny as more information becomes available, particularly on the impacts of some elements. I would like to initially propose that instead of a key line of inquiry, we do carry out a further review of the budget at a later point this year. This may be July or it may be September. I will take guidance on what is the most appropriate timing of that. So those are the 4 items on our forward work plan as it stands at the moment. Councillor Canavan, you've indicated.
Just a bit concerned, Chair, about a suggestion that it might drift beyond July. I thought we'd bottomed that out. I thought we were looking to have a budget update in July. So unless there are some, technical reasons why that can't be done, I would expect to see it on the July agenda.
Thank you for your comment, and I agree. I would prefer to see it at the July panel. I would be willing to hear from either the PCC or the CFO on whether structurally that works.
The difficulty we don't know is the bits of information that we need. Last year turned up in April, didn't it?
The neighbourhood policing grants, last year we had confirmation of what we could spend the grant on the 10th of April, but we didn't have the final grant agreement, which has all of the conditions in it, until the 20th of June. So the July meeting is the 2nd of July, I think. So if it was that sort of timescale, we might still be struggling to get all of the information. There would be some information we could do. So we'll need to assess nearer the time when we've got all of that, how much we can give.
Can I make a small point? Because it's not only getting the information from government. But if it's that tight, the force won't have had time to assimilate it and then come back with this is what the implications are. So it's tight. It depends when we get the information, and it depends when the force can give us their information.
Okay, so we need to do an element of keeping an eye on how things develop and then decide whether it's appropriate and we have the information to bring forward. How does that sound to you, Councillor Canavan?
I absolutely understand the point, but I just think, well, it just feels as though there's quite a long gap between July and October.
I agree, but I also think if we don't fundamentally have the information to and analysis, I feel it's probably best to take guidance from the OPCC and assess the appropriateness of the report closer to the panel, whilst indicating that we would prefer July if possible. I think that's the most pragmatic approach, personally, at this point. Do we have any other follow-up or questions on the forward work plan? Okay. In which case, there are some items further afield in October. So the further horizon includes heritage crime, a rural crime update, and we've already forwarded budget and projects 12. Okay, so I think we move on to agenda item 10, urgent items. Do we have any urgent items? Okay. Any exempt business? No. Wonderful. I believe that brings us to the end of this quarter's panel, pending any further input. I would like to give my sincere, grateful thanks to the panel members for your patience in the extended agenda today, and also your hard work and feedback in the scrutiny of the budget report. I'd like to thank the PCC and his officers, particularly the Chief Financial Officer, for the delivery of the budget report, and also the attention to detail in the answers given today. Beyond that, thank you all, and we will reconvene in July.